Imagine a time between 1800 and 1850 when civilization's reach ended at the horizon. It was then that approximately 20,000 intrepid mountain men dared to plunge into the raw, unforgiving American wilderness. They faced down brutal winters, the gnawing specter of starvation, and deadly encounters, armed with little more than a formidable axe, a trusty rifle, and an unshakable resolve. These weren't mere adventurers. They were masters of survival, conquering the continent's most formidable landscapes with skills that have all but vanished from our modern world. With nothing but their own powerful hands and rudimentary tools, they didn't just survive. They transformed dense forests into resilient shelters that would stand as testaments to their grit for generations. Are you ready to discover the unvarnished truth of constructing a cabin from the ground up in a truly untamed wilderness? Before we fully immerse ourselves in this incredible journey, a brief moment. If these narratives consistently captivate you, we implore you to engage, hit like or subscribe. We are always curious about the global reach of these stories. Consider sharing your city and local time in the comments. It's astonishing to imagine some of you beginning your day in London, while here in the States, the evening draws to a close. Tonight, we journey back to the arduous frontier of the 1830s. But first, we insist, truly settle in. Adjust your pillows. Claim that blanket. This is a tale that demands your full, uninterrupted attention, a story so vivid, you will feel your eyes slowly parting to an unfamiliar, profound darkness that forget the gentle dimness of your modern bedroom, where artificial light might pierce through blinds. This is an absolute primal darkness, a suffocating void that threatens to swallow you whole. It is a frigid October morning in 1834, deep within what we now know as Montana. But then, it is merely an unbroken wilderness, a vast, untamed expanse of soaring mountains and dense forests where the singular unforgiving law is survival itself. The very ground beneath you is a slab of hard-packed earth, solidified by the overnight chill. Every muscle in your body screams in protest, ravaged by a night spent on meager pine boughs, offering scant defense against the brutal cold. Your wool blanket, stiff with frost, crackles as you move, and each breath you exhale blossoms into a visible cloud in the pre-dawn air. The life-sustaining fire from last night has dwindled to mere embers, offering little solace. Your hands, already a canvas of fresh, stinging blisters, protest as you push yourself upright. The air hums with an ominous prediction. A storm, brewing for days, is now closing in with terrifying speed. Ominous dark clouds hang heavy over the distant, jagged peaks, and the wind, growing sharper, carries the unmistakable chilling scent of imminent snow. You have navigated these mountains long enough to decipher nature's grim warnings. This is not simply another storm. This is a relentless, deadly tempest, capable of extinguishing the lives of any unprepared soul. Presented with such stark reality, your options are brutally clear. Erect a substantial shelter today, or face the certainty of freezing to death within the week. What most people utterly fail to grasp, a profound insight, I gleaned from an ancient journal unearthed in a historical society archive, is the chilling reality. A mountain man, once sensing the inevitable onset of winter, typically had a mere 12 hours to erect a foundational cabin. 12 critical hours separated the brutal finality of death from the desperate grasp of life. This remarkable journal belonged to Jeremiah Winters, a trapper who relentlessly worked these very mountains in the 1830s. He vividly recounted constructing a cabin with nothing more than an axe so keen it could sever bone, hands hardened like old leather, and the terrifying, absolute certainty that any misstep meant immediate demise. His narrative isn't merely fascinating. It stands as irrefutable proof of the unparalleled skill these men possessed. This was far from simply haphazardly stacking a few logs together. As you stretch your aching back, every muscle protesting yesterday's brutal labor, you recall the meticulous effort that led you here. For 3 arduous days, you tirelessly scouted this unforgiving terrain, seeking not just a spot, but the perfect location for survival. Yesterday, finally triumphantly, you discovered it. A small, defensible clearing nestled on a gentle south-facing slope. Crucially, it lies near a spring that promises to defy even the most profound winter freeze. To the north, a formidable natural windbreak of dense pine stands sentinel, offering vital protection. And from this commanding elevation, your vigilant gaze can sweep for miles, detecting any approaching presence long before it becomes a threat. Understand this. These were not arbitrary selections. Every single decision you make here is critical, for your very existence hangs precariously in the balance. Allow me to vividly illustrate the sheer scale of your immediate challenge. You are encircled by colossal pines, their mighty trunks a formidable 3 feet thick, soaring an astonishing 100 feet towards the sky. The forest floor is a chaotic maze, a relentless tangle of ancient fallen logs, unyielding rocks, and suffocating undergrowth. To an uninitiated eye, this is merely an overwhelming, hostile wilderness. Yet, to a seasoned mountain man, this seemingly impenetrable chaos is pure potential. Every single component essential for your survival is present, if only you possess the profound knowledge of how to harness it. With deliberate precision, you reach for your possibles bag, a rugged leather pouch, the very repository of your immediate survival. Within it lie your indispensable essentials: flint and steel, a keen knife, a reliable whetstone, a few precious strips of jerky, and a small but vital pouch of salt. Your life-saving rifle rests against a nearby tree, while your axe, a meticulously handcrafted tool, its formidable head forged in the distant workshops of St. Louis, remains precisely where you buried it yesterday, in a stump. I've had the rare privilege of holding one of these authentic period axes in a Wyoming museum. The curator's words resonated deeply. These were not merely tools. They were, quite literally, a man's life. A mountain man would rather sleep with his axe than risk its theft. As the first faint tendrils of dawn struggle to pierce the dense forest canopy, you tend to the dying embers of last night's fire. You carefully add a handful of shredded cedar bark, tinder you meticulously kept dry within your bag. Blowing gently, rhythmically, you coax the reluctant sparks to life. The minuscule flame catches, a fragile victory, and soon a modest fire provides just enough warmth to thaw your hands and prepare a meager breakfast: jerky and the last of your cornmeal, mixed with icy water. Consider this profound truth. For these indomitable men, this was not camping. This was simply Tuesday. This was their existence, year after relentless year, utterly alone in the colossal wilderness. Can you truly conceive of enduring months, even years, without a single human interaction? For us, a momentary Wi-Fi outage can induce anxiety. For them, total isolation was the unyielding standard. Breakfast consumed, a sparse fuel for the monumental labor ahead, you retrieve your axe and stride towards the clearing's edge. Today marks the true beginning. You have meticulously pre-selected several magnificent lodgepole pines. Their inherent straight grain and formidable resistance to rot, rendering them absolutely ideal for cabin logs. Recall the timeless wisdom, as imparted by an old mountain man to a journalist in 1872. Choose your trees as you would choose a wife, straight, strong, and capable of weathering any storm. You approach the first colossus, a tree approximately 14 inches in diameter, its summit reaching an astounding 100 feet into the sky. Drawing a deep, resolute breath, you initiate the rhythmic swing of your axe, relishing the visceral, satisfying bite as the razor-sharp edge cleaves into the tough bark. Wood chips explode outwards with each impact, as you precisely carve a directional notch, dictating the tree's ultimate descent. Your arms already scream in protest, burning with raw effort, yet you press on relentlessly. There can be no reprieve, not with winter's unforgiving embrace looming. Every single swing of your axe is a deliberate, calculated act. You are not merely severing wood. You are engaged in an intimate, profound dialogue with the tree itself, meticulously reading its inherent lean, its precarious balance, and precisely understanding its destined fall. Pause. Truly absorb this image. You stand utterly alone in an immense, indifferent wilderness. Should this colossal tree fall awry, if it snaps back with lethal force or deviates even slightly from your intended trajectory, there is no one, absolutely no one, to extricate you from its crushing weight. No frantic call for an ambulance, no distant hospital within 1,000 miles. One fatal miscalculation, and you are instantly transformed into another nameless, forgotten casualty of the brutal frontier. I consulted a distinguished wilderness survival expert, a specialist in historical techniques, who revealed a truly fascinating insight. These men cultivated an almost supernatural sixth sense for trees. They possessed an uncanny ability to decipher the most subtle indicators of a tree's fall. The intricate distribution of branch weight, the nuanced twist of the grain, even the prevailing wind's influence. This was not merely brute strength. It was an intimate, almost spiritual communion with their raw materials. The formidable notch deepens, now nearly a third of the way through the trunk's immense girth. With meticulous care, you shift to the opposite side, executing a slightly higher cut. This precise technique, a sacred wisdom inherited from indigenous tribes and honed to perfection over generations of woodsmen, guarantees the tree will plummet exactly where you command it. With a final explosive series of powerful swings, the forest reverberates with an unmistakable sound. That chilling, resonant crack signaling the tree's imminent surrender. You recoil instantly, eyes locked onto the pine's soaring crown as it sways precariously, hesitates for an agonizing moment, and then, with an elemental groan, yields to gravity. The thunderous crash echoes explosively through the ancient forest as 100 feet of pine leviathan obliterates the ground, sending countless birds scattering in a chaotic burst from nearby branches. The sheer impact reverberates through the earth beneath your very feet, and the sharp, invigorating scent of fresh-cut pine saturates the cold air. One formidable obstacle overcome. Yet, you will demand at least 20 more such victories before this relentless day concludes. Your body, a symphony of protest, screams for rest, but the ominous clouds on the horizon are rapidly darkening. You can practically taste the snow on the frigid air. Perhaps a mere 12 hours remain before the full fury of the storm descends. If fortune smiles upon you, here's a crucial detail, often conspicuously absent from the sanitized pages of history books. A mountain man's need for shelter extended far beyond his own survival. Consider your horses, tethered nearby, their nervous grazing disturbed by the rapidly intensifying wind. To lose your horse to the unforgiving cold was quite literally to seal your own fate. You might as well begin digging your grave. Without a horse, you faced absolute immobility, rendered utterly incapable of transporting vital traps or precious furs. More ominously, it meant sacrificing your sole means of escape from hostile native tribes or relentless predators. An astute 1840s account starkly declared the grim calculus. A wise trapper constructs his horse's shelter before his own. For a dead trapper may still possess his horse, but a living trapper, stripped of his mount, will swiftly join the ranks of the dead. With the Leviathan now felled, an equally demanding task awaits: limbing. Every single branch must be meticulously severed, leaving nothing but a clean, unblemished trunk. Your axe, a relentless extension of your will, bites sharply into the smaller limbs. Larger branches, however, demand a surgeon's precision. Cut with excruciating care to prevent the axe from binding, a dangerous and energy-sapping setback. Each stroke is a testament to calculated survival. Precision is paramount. Wasted energy, even a single superfluous movement, can directly translate to death when your body is relentlessly incinerating thousands of calories daily simply to sustain life. The sun ascends higher, yet its promise of warmth is a cruel, fleeting illusion. The wind gains malevolent strength, carrying with it the first ominous snowflakes. You accelerate your efforts, stripping the tree to its pristine, bare log, then immediately pivot to the next marked pine. By midday, your hands are a raw, ravaged mess. Blood, warm and slick, seeps continuously through fresh weeping blisters, rendering the axe handle not just painful, but treacherously difficult to grip. Yet, you cannot. Asterisk will not asterisk cease. 3 colossal trees now lie prone, their massive trunks arranged in stark, parallel lines across the clearing, grim monuments to your unwavering struggle. In my meticulous research, I unearthed a visceral account from a mountain man named James Kleiman, who penned these haunting words. My hands bled so bad from the axe that my log notches filled with blood. By nightfall, I couldn't feel my fingers, but I kept swinging. The alternative was a shallow grave come spring. This chilling testimony leaves no doubt as to the unimaginable dedication required. A deep, guttural growl erupts from your stomach, a stark reminder that you have consumed nothing since the earliest stirrings of dawn. You allow yourself only a fleeting pause, just long enough to gnaw on a meager strip of jerky and gulp down water from the nearby spring. The icy liquid stabs at your teeth with agonizing sharpness, yet it offers a vital, if momentary, resurgence of strength. The next tree looms before you, an even more formidable challenge, nearly 2 feet in diameter. You circle it with a hunter's keen eye, meticulously assessing the optimal approach before launching into another bout of relentless chopping. Your muscles, now a symphony of endurance, have discovered a brutal rhythm. And despite the searing pain, each swing descends with a practiced, lethal precision. But then, midway through this Herculean effort, disaster explodes. The axe head, relentlessly battered by thousands of bone-jarring impacts, suddenly tears free from its handle, arcing through the air to land several agonizing feet away within the dense underbrush. Well shit, you rasp, a raw primal expletive escaping your lips, as you stare in horrified disbelief at the now useless, splintered wooden handle clutched in your hand. This, my friends, is a moment modern society cannot even begin to comprehend. Today, such a mishap might warrant a trip to a hardware store. Here, in this unforgiving wilderness, it could, with terrifying certainty, spell your doom. Your heart thunders a frantic beat against your ribs as you desperately scour the tangled undergrowth. The loss of your axe, your very lifeline, would be an absolute catastrophe. You drop to your knees, fingers clawing frantically through damp leaves and twigs until, miraculously, there it is, the dull gleam of the metal head in the dappled sunlight. A tidal wave of relief washes over you, but it is brutally short-lived. It must be reattached, and with blistering speed from the depths of your vital possibles bag, you extract a small, carefully preserved roll of rawhide. You then meticulously soak it in water drawn from your canteen, coaxing it into a pliable state. The intricate repair begins. With a craftsman's precision, you painstakingly reshape the top of the wooden handle, ensuring a perfect fit into the axe head. Then, with a forceful resolve, you wedge the two components back together, tightly binding the wet rawhide around the crucial join. You understand the ingenious mechanics. As the rawhide dries, it will relentlessly shrink, forging a bond nearly as unyielding as iron itself. While this crucial bond cures, you cannot afford idleness. Your knife, now your primary tool, is pressed into service, continuing the arduous task of limbing the fallen trees. It is slower, undeniably more tedious work, but in this unforgiving landscape, a single wasted moment could prove fatal. I had the privilege of interviewing a historical reenactor, a true master of mountain man skills. He articulated a profound truth. These men were far more than mere survivors. They were problem solvers of the highest order. Imagine, they were compelled to be engineers, architects, doctors, hunters, weathermen, and warriors, all distilled into one formidable individual. And they achieved all this with perhaps a mere 10 tools in their entire arsenal. After an agonizing hour, the rawhide has sufficiently dried, allowing you to cautiously, tentatively resume your monumental work. The axe head feels secure for now, a fragile assurance, but you know vigilance is paramount. It will demand frequent inspection. Each initial swing is hesitant, a test of trust, but swiftly, with practiced determination, you reclaim your formidable pace. The day relentlessly grinds on. 4 trees felled, then 5, then 6. Your elongated shadow stretches across the clearing, a silent testament to the sun's inexorable descent behind the towering mountains. The temperature plummets with alarming speed, and the snowflakes, now robust and frequent, begin their serious fall. Your body has reached its absolute breaking point. Every muscle screams a primal demand for rest. Blood has saturated your buckskin gloves, and your vision, blurred by profound exhaustion, threatens to fail you. Yet, you know with chilling certainty that the meager, primitive shelter of pine boughs from last night offers no hope against the onslaught that is coming. You cast your gaze skyward, toward the rapidly darkening expanse. "Just give me till morning," you whisper, a desperate plea aimed at an unknown god, or perhaps merely the indifferent, colossal mountains themselves. With 7 formidable pines now felled and limbed, you possess a foundational supply, enough to commence the actual life-saving cabin construction. Tomorrow will necessitate more felling, but today's brutal, unwavering effort has secured you a fighting chance. As impenetrable darkness descends, you vigorously tend to your fire, coaxing it into a roaring blaze. You then force yourself to consume more jerky, even as exhaustion has utterly annihilated your appetite, knowing that every single calorie is a critical investment in tomorrow's unrelenting labor. The wind, a mournful lament, moans through the trees as the snow begins to fall in earnest, a white shroud descending upon the wilderness. You wrap yourself tightly in your blanket beside the fire, your trusty axe a comforting presence within arm's reach. Sleep claims you instantly, your body capitulating to the overwhelming force of sheer exhaustion. Yet, even in the depths of slumber, your mind remains relentlessly active, problem-solving, planning the next day's brutal schedule, calculating material needs, devising log-notching strategies, envisioning the rising walls, the eventual roof. For out here, survival dictates that even your dreams must be intensely practical. Contrast this with your own cozy bed right now, with its soft mattress and abundant warm covers. Your sleep is fractured, hyper-alert, primed to awaken at the slightest discordant sound. The shrill scream of mountain lions, the haunting howl of wolves, or far worse, the unnervingly soft footfall of an approaching grizzly, drawn by the undeniable scent of man. Here, we must pause for tonight. Tomorrow, we will witness whether our mountain man can successfully raise those crucial walls before the storm's full, devastating force erupts. But for this moment, allow the gentle, reassuring weight of your blankets to remind you of the immense chasm separating us from those desperate days when shelter was not a luxury, but the absolute, stark demarcation between life and death. As you drift towards sleep, truly imagine the profound weight of knowing your very survival hinges entirely on what your own two hands can construct before the storm's furious arrival. Something is profoundly wrong. Your eyes snap open, piercing the complete darkness. For a heart-stopping moment, the fog of sleep obscures your location. Then, the grim reality crashes upon you. The isolated clearing, the felled trees, the relentless, approaching storm. The fire has died. This chilling realization is what jolted you awake. The bitter cold has stealthily crept in, seeping through your protective wool blanket, burrowing deep into your very bones. You force yourself upright, every muscle screaming in agonizing protest. Your hands, stiff and unresponsive, can barely flex. The blisters, once raw, are now frozen scabs that crack and bleed with each agonizing movement of your fingers. Snow blankets the ground around you, not a gentle dusting from yesterday evening, but a solid 3 inches fallen silently as you slept, a pristine, white shroud covering everything. Your breath hangs in the frigid air, a cloud of crystallized vapor that dissipates slowly in the utter stillness of the morning. You glance toward the eastern sky. No hint of dawn yet, but you cannot afford to wait for the sun's grudging appearance. Every precious hour of daylight is a lifeline now. I recall a harrowing account from a trapper named William Anderson, who described waking in similar brutal conditions. My beard had frozen to my blanket. When I tore free, it pulled out a patch of whiskers. My spit turned to ice before it hit the ground. But I knew that if I didn't move, I'd be stiff as a board by sunup. With aching, unresponsive fingers, you desperately rake through the ashes of last night's fire, a fervent prayer for a single live coal on your lips. There, a faint, hesitant orange glow buried deep within the white ash. With painstaking care, you gently place your handful of tinder, cedar bark, meticulously kept dry inside your shirt, over the ember, and blow softly, rhythmically, coaxing it back to life. The spark catches, a fragile tendril of smoke rising from the tinder. You add pencil-thin twigs, then slightly larger ones, building the fire methodically, reverently. Out here, fire is not merely comfort. It is life itself. As the flames grow, you stand and stomp your feet, desperately attempting to force blood back into your numb toes. Every joint in your body feels as though it is filled with ground glass. But you are alive. And as long as you draw breath, you can build. While the fire gains strength, you meticulously check your dwindling supplies. The jerky is almost gone, perhaps 2 days' worth if you ration it with extreme care. Your precious powder, thank God, remains perfectly dry, safely wrapped in oiled cloth. The axe head, your most vital tool, is still firmly attached to its handle. These are small but monumental victories. You, astutely, slept in your boots to prevent them from freezing solid. This was a smart move, for wet leather freezes harder than stone, and you simply cannot work with feet that feel like blocks of ice. You wolf down a single strip of jerky and drink from your canteen. The water inside is half-frozen slush, a painful reminder of the brutal cold. The forest is preternaturally quiet, muffled by the pervasive snow. You can almost hear the frantic beating of your own heart. This is the profound silence that, after too many months alone, drives men to converse with themselves. Okay, you mutter, your voice sounding foreign and strange after days of unbroken silence. Gotta get moving. You know, mountain men had a brutally simple saying, dawn to dusk, swing that axe or come spring, a bear's on your grave. Not exactly poetry, but its message was terrifyingly clear. The fresh snow has dramatically complicated matters. You will need to clear it from the fallen logs before you can even begin to work them. And felling more trees means trudging through deep snow to find the perfect ones. But first things first, you must begin processing the logs you already possess. Yesterday was about sheer quantity, getting enough trees down. Today is about absolute precision, transforming those raw logs into the vital components of a cabin that will preserve your life. With your knife, you scrape a patch of snow clear and use a charred stick to sketch a rough, yet critical, plan in the dirt. The cabin will be small, roughly 10 feet by 12 feet, just enough space for a simple sleeping platform, a functional fireplace, and minimal room to maneuver. Anything larger would be utterly impossible to heat efficiently in this unforgiving climate. As the first gray, hesitant light of dawn filters through the dense pines, you gather your tools and approach the first massive log. Ideally, these logs would season for months, but winter's relentless advance grants no such luxury. You will have to work with green wood and later contend with the inevitable shrinkage. The crucial first step: remove the bark. Bark retains moisture and acts as a beacon for destructive insects. It must go. You take your axe and begin stripping the log, working methodically from one end to the other. The bark peels away in satisfying, thick chunks, revealing the pale, fresh, vulnerable wood beneath. I once attempted this arduous task at a living history museum in Colorado. The historian there remarked, "Most folks don't realize that debarking a single log can consume hours." These mountain men would spend days just prepping logs before they could even begin construction. The work is tedious, yet it becomes a relentless, hypnotic rhythm. As you settle into the familiar swing-scrape-move pattern, your muscles gradually warm, and the searing pain recedes to a dull, persistent throb in the background. The sun finally crests the eastern mountains, sending long, golden, deceptive rays through the trees. The snow glitters like scattered diamonds, and for a fleeting moment, its breathtaking beauty steals your breath. Then, a sudden brutal gust of wind cuts through your buckskins, a chilling reminder that out here, beauty is often just death wearing a pretty mask. By mid-morning, you've debarked 3 logs. Your stomach is a symphony of growls, but you ruthlessly ignore it. There is no time for a proper meal now. You chew another strip of jerky as you work, the tough meat slowly softening in your mouth. Now comes the truly challenging part: notching. The corners of your cabin, its very structural integrity, will be held together by precisely cut notches that interlock the logs. Get this wrong, and your walls will be perilously unstable, riddled with gaping cracks that welcome the insidious wind and suffocating snow. You've observed enough cabins to grasp the fundamental technique: the saddle notch. It is the simplest yet most profoundly effective for a solitary builder. You will carve a rounded groove near the end of each log, meticulously sized to cradle the log that will rest upon it. Measuring is absolutely crucial. You pace off the dimensions again, marking the corners with temporary stakes. Then, with brute force, you drag the first debarked log into position, forming the base of the north wall. Marking the precise notch points demands careful, critical calculation. You hold your axe handle horizontally across the log, using it as a straight edge to mark where the cuts must be made. 2 notches, one at each end, destined to receive the east and west wall logs. With your axe, you initiate a series of parallel cuts at the marked point, approximately 4 inches apart and 6 inches deep. Then, with powerful blows, you chop out the wood between the cuts, forming a rough trough. This first notch isn't aesthetically pleasing, but it doesn't need to be. It simply needs to securely hold the next log. The sun climbs higher, melting some of the snow, but its warmth is a weak illusion. Your back is slick with sweat despite the cold, and you pause occasionally to drink from the perpetually icy spring. The work is agonizingly slow, demanding exacting precision. Each notch demands at least 20 minutes of careful, deliberate chopping. Hold up a second. Allow me to paint you a vivid, unvarnished picture of this moment. You stand in a small, hard-won clearing, encircled by towering, silent pines. The distant mountains rise like stoic blue giants, eternally watchful. The fresh snow, a pristine blanket, covers everything save for the immediate circle around your dwindling fire and the raw, exposed areas where you've been toiling. Your breath, a visible ghost, clouds perpetually in front of you. Your hands are raw, leaving undeniable smears of crimson on the pale, vulnerable wood. Every few minutes, you halt your brutal work to wipe sweat from your eyes with a sleeve already stiff with frozen perspiration. A solitary hawk circles overhead, effortlessly riding the thermal currents, perhaps wondering what this peculiar, determined, 2-legged creature is doing. The only sounds are the rhythmic, hungry bite of your axe into wood, your own ragged, labored breathing, and occasionally, the distant, mournful howl of a wolf. This, my friends, is the profound, unyielding meaning of solitude. Not an hour disconnected from your phone. I am speaking of absolute, complete isolation from humanity. It is just you, the formidable mountains, and the chilling, ever-present knowledge that if you fail, no one will ever find your body. By noon, you have meticulously positioned and notched the 4 base logs. The very foundation of your cabin, your sanctuary, is undeniably beginning to take shape. It is a simple rectangle, starkly marked out on the snowy ground, yet you are only just commencing this monumental task. You desperately need more trees. The 7 you felled yesterday are woefully insufficient. Surveying your meager progress, you grimly estimate you'll require at least 15 more for the walls alone, plus additional timber for the roof. You trudge resolutely through the snow, axe slung over your shoulder, relentlessly searching for the perfect trees. Not just any tree will suffice. You demand straight ones, exhibiting minimal taper, ideally about a foot in diameter, pines preferred for their inherent straight grain and formidable natural resistance to rot. I consulted a forestry expert who meticulously studied the cabins built by these mountain men, and he revealed a fascinating detail. These guys were incredibly selective. They could glance at a stand of 100 trees and instantly pinpoint the 5 worth cutting. They weren't merely lumberjacks. They were master craftsmen who understood their materials intimately. You spot a perfect candidate, a lodgepole pine, approximately 14 inches at its base, arrow straight with minimal branches on its lower trunk. You carefully scan the surrounding area to ensure a clear fall path. Then, with renewed determination, you begin chopping. Your technique has demonstrably improved since yesterday. You carve the directional notch on the fall side more quickly now, precisely angling your cuts to create a meticulous wedge. Then you shift to the backside, making a slightly higher horizontal cut. The tree begins to creak, a chilling protest. You step back, vigilant, watching the top for any subtle sign of movement. There is a moment of profound stillness, then a sharp, resonant crack. The pine begins its unstoppable descent, gathering terrifying speed, its branches rushing through the air with a sound like tearing fabric. It falls exactly where you intended, crashing through the smaller trees in its path, finally coming to rest with a ground-shaking thud that sends a puff of snow billowing into the air. One down. Many more such victories are desperately needed. The day settles into a brutal, monotonous rhythm. Fell limb, debark, repeat. Your body moves on autopilot, a machine fueled by grim necessity, while your mind drifts, a desperate escape. You yearn for the warm, bustling trading posts down on the Missouri, with their roaring fires and comforting barrels of whiskey. You conjure images of St. Louis, with its vibrant bustle and noise, its women in calico dresses. It all seems like a distant, impossible dream now. I unearthed this poignant letter from a mountain man to his sister back east. Sometimes I wonder if the towns still exist, or if they've all vanished like morning mist. The wilderness has a way of making civilization seem like a story someone told you once. By mid-afternoon, you've added 3 more colossal trees to your dwindling stockpile. Your hands have transcended near pain, entering a realm of numb, detached agony. Blood has soaked through your buckskin gloves, rendering the axe handle sticky and treacherous. You've ceased to register the cold, save for the brutal, biting gusts of wind. The sky is darkening once more, not merely with the approach of evening, but with the unmistakable advance of more ominous weather. The storm is relentlessly building, layers of heavy, pregnant clouds rolling in from the northwest. You might have one more day before it unleashes its full, devastating force. You turn your attention back to the cabin site. With the foundational base logs finally in place, you must now begin the arduous process of building upward. This is where the true challenge intensifies. Raising these massive logs alone is absolutely backbreaking work. For the next level, you meticulously cut a sloping ramp from smaller logs, creating a rough incline leading up to the top of the base logs. Then, with agonizing solitary effort, you laboriously roll the next log up this precarious ramp, your shoulders serving as the primary protesting power source. The first one nearly defeats you entirely. Halfway up the ramp, the log shifts unexpectedly, almost rolling back over you with crushing force. You leap aside just in time, watching in furious despair as it crashes back to the ground, obliterating a section of your painstakingly constructed ramp. Son of a, you snarl, kicking at the snow in a burst of impotent frustration. I read a harrowing account from a trapper who described this exact, terrifying problem. Raising logs alone is a dance with death. One slip, and 2,000 pounds of pine will snap your spine like a twig. I saw a man near Fort Hall crushed flat when his log rolled. We buried what was left of him in a shallow grave and divided his possessions. That's frontier justice. With grim resolve, you rebuild the ramp, making it less steep, and attempt the perilous task again. This time, you ingeniously use a rope, crudely looped around the log, to help control its treacherous ascent as you roll it upward. Your progress is agonizingly slow, each inch a monumental triumph, but finally, the log reaches the top of the ramp and settles with a satisfying thud into the notches painstakingly carved into the base. Logs, success. One wall now stands 2 logs high. The remainder of the afternoon dissolves into a blur of searing sweat and raw strain. You manage to raise just 1 more log on each wall before the inexorable darkness begins to fall. The temperature plummets with the setting sun, and the wind intensifies, driving icy needles of snow against your exposed face. Your fingers are numb, useless claws, and your lips are cracked and bleeding from the brutal cold and profound dehydration. When you finally halt your labor, your legs nearly buckle beneath you. The cabin, your nascent sanctuary, is truly taking shape, a rectangle of logs, 2 high, the desperate beginnings of what will be your fortress against the coming winter. But it is nowhere near complete. At your current, solo pace, you grimly estimate 3 more days of brutal work before it is even marginally habitable. The terrifying question is whether the storm will grant you that precious time. You gather precious firewood, armloads of branches from the trees you felled, and build your fire to a roaring blaze. Tonight will be far colder than last night, and you desperately need every single calorie of warmth you can coax from the flames. Sitting by the fire, you pull off your buckskin gloves to inspect your ravaged hands. They are a catastrophic mess, blisters upon blisters, some broken and weeping, others swollen with fluid. Your palms are a tortured crisscross of cuts from bark and embedded splinters. You pour a little precious water over them, not for comfort, but to clean away the blood and grit. Then you hold them close to the ravenous flames, welcoming the stinging, agonizing pain that signals the return of feeling. Your muscles are trembling uncontrollably with exhaustion, and hunger gnaws with predatory intent at your belly. You force yourself to eat sparingly, just enough jerky to maintain your fading strength. When that runs out, you will have to hunt, but that is a problem for another day. As darkness settles fully over the forest, you wrap yourself in your blanket and collapse beside the fire. The day's brutal work has left you too utterly exhausted to even register discomfort. Sleep claims you almost instantly, dragging you down into absolute blackness. But even in sleep, your mind remains relentlessly active, solving problems, planning tomorrow's monumental labor, how to raise the walls higher, how to create the crucial gable ends, how to fashion a roof that will not collapse under the inevitable weight of snow. Because out here, survival demands that even your most desperate dreams must be intensely practical. Unlike your cozy bed right now, with its soft mattress and warm covers, your sleep is light, fractured, hyper-alert, ready to awaken at any sound that signifies danger. The piercing scream of mountain lions, the haunting howl of wolves, or far worse, the unnervingly soft footfall of an approaching grizzly, drawn by the undeniable scent of man. This is where we will pause for tonight. Tomorrow, we will discover if our mountain man can truly raise those walls before the full, devastating force of the storm descends. But for now, allow the gentle, reassuring weight of your blankets to remind you of the immense chasm between our present comfort and those desperate days when shelter was not a luxury, but the absolute, stark demarcation between life and death. Truly imagine as you drift towards sleep. The profound weight of knowing your very survival hinges entirely on what your own two hands can construct before the storm's furious arrival. Something is terribly wrong. Your eyes snap open to an absolute suffocating darkness. For a heart-stopping moment, disorientation clutches you. Then, the grim reality floods back. The clearing, the felled trees, the relentless storm. The fire has died. That is what tore you from sleep. The bitter cold has permeated every fiber, seeping through your wool blanket, settling deep within your very bones. You force yourself to sit up, every muscle screaming in agonizing protest. Your hands are so stiff they can barely obey your will. The blisters, once merely painful, are now frozen scabs that crack and bleed anew as you attempt to flex your fingers. Snow blankets the ground around you, not the gentle dusting of yesterday evening, but a solid 3 inches, a silent white shroud that fell unbidden as you slept. Your breath hangs heavy in the air, a cloud of crystallized vapor that dissipates slowly in the profound stillness of the pre-dawn. You check the eastern sky. No hint of a coming dawn, but you cannot afford to wait for the sun. Every hour of daylight is a precious vital currency now. I recall a vivid account from a trapper named William Anderson, who described awakening in precisely such conditions. My beard had frozen to my blanket. When I tore free, it pulled out a patch of whiskers. My spit turned to ice before it hit the ground. But I knew that if I didn't move, I'd be stiff as a board by sunup. With aching, almost useless fingers, you desperately rake through the ashes of last night's fire, a fervent prayer for a single live coal on your lips. There, a faint, hopeful orange glow buried deep within the white ash. With painstaking care, you gently place your handful of tinder, cedar bark, meticulously kept dry inside your shirt, over the ember, and blow softly, rhythmically, coaxing it back to life. The spark catches, a fragile tendril of smoke rising from the tinder. You add pencil-thin twigs, then slightly larger ones, building the fire methodically, with profound reverence. Out here, fire is not merely comfort. It is life itself. As the flames finally grow, you stand and stomp your feet, desperately attempting to force blood back into your numb toes. Every joint in your body feels as though it is filled with ground glass. But you are alive. And as long as you draw breath, you can build. While the fire gains its essential strength, you meticulously check your dwindling supplies. The jerky is almost gone, perhaps 2 days' worth if you ration it with extreme care. Your precious powder, thank God, remains perfectly dry, safely wrapped in oiled cloth. The axe head, your most vital tool, is still firmly attached to its handle. These are small but monumental victories. You astutely slept in your boots to prevent them from freezing solid. This was a smart move, for wet leather freezes harder than stone, and you simply cannot work with feet that feel like blocks of ice. You wolf down a single strip of jerky and drink from your canteen. The water inside is half-frozen slush, a painful reminder of the brutal cold. The forest is preternaturally quiet, muffled by the pervasive snow. You can almost hear the frantic beating of your own heart. This is the profound silence that, after too many months alone, drives men to converse with themselves. Okay, you mutter, your voice sounding foreign and strange after days of unbroken silence. Got to get moving. You know, mountain men had a brutally simple saying, dawn to dusk. Swing that axe, or come spring, a bear's on your grave. Not exactly poetry, But its message was terrifyingly clear. The fresh snow has dramatically complicated matters. You will need to clear it from the fallen logs before you can even begin to work them. And felling more trees means trudging through deep snow to find the perfect ones. But first things first, you must begin processing the logs you already possess. Yesterday was about sheer quantity, getting enough trees down. Today is about absolute precision, transforming those raw logs into the vital components of a cabin that will preserve your life. With your knife, you scrape a patch of snow clear and use a charred stick to sketch a rough, yet critical, plan in the dirt. The cabin will be small, roughly 10 feet by 12 feet, just enough space for a simple sleeping platform, a functional fireplace, and minimal room to maneuver. Anything larger would be utterly impossible to heat efficiently in this unforgiving climate. As the first gray, hesitant light of dawn filters through the dense pines, you gather your tools and approach the first massive log. Ideally, these logs would season for months, but winter's relentless advance grants no such luxury. You will have to work with green wood and later contend with the inevitable shrinkage. The crucial first step: remove the bark. Bark retains moisture and acts as a beacon for destructive insects. It must go. You take your axe and begin stripping the log, working methodically from one end to the other. The bark peels away in satisfying, thick chunks, revealing the pale, fresh, vulnerable wood beneath. I once attempted this arduous task at a living history museum in Colorado. The historian there remarked, "Most folks don't realize that debarking a single log can consume hours." These mountain men would spend days just prepping logs before they could even begin construction. The work is tedious, yet it becomes a relentless, hypnotic rhythm. As you settle into the familiar swing, scrape, move pattern, your muscles gradually warm, and the searing pain recedes to a dull, persistent throb in the background. The sun finally crests the eastern mountains, sending long, golden, deceptive rays through the trees. The snow glitters like scattered diamonds, and for a fleeting moment, its breathtaking beauty steals your breath. Then, a sudden brutal gust of wind cuts through your buckskins, a chilling reminder that out here, beauty is often just death wearing a pretty mask. By mid-morning, you've debarked 3 logs. Your stomach is a symphony of growls, but you ruthlessly ignore it. There is no time for a proper meal now. You chew another strip of jerky as you work, the tough meat slowly softening in your mouth. Now comes the truly challenging part: notching. The corners of your cabin, its very structural integrity, will be held together by precisely cut notches that interlock the logs. Get this wrong, and your walls will be perilously unstable, riddled with gaping cracks that welcome the insidious wind and suffocating snow. You've observed enough cabins to grasp the fundamental technique: the saddle notch. It is the simplest, yet most profoundly effective, for a solitary builder. You will carve a rounded groove near the end of each log, meticulously sized to cradle the log that will rest upon it. Measuring is absolutely crucial. You pace off the dimensions again, marking the corners with temporary stakes. Then, with brute force, you drag the first debarked log into position, forming the base of the north wall. Marking the precise notch points demands careful, critical calculation. You hold your axe handle horizontally across the log, using it as a straight edge to mark where the cuts must be made. 2 notches, one at each end, destined to receive the east and west wall logs. With your axe, you initiate a series of parallel cuts at the marked point, approximately 4 inches apart and 6 inches deep. Then, with powerful blows, you chop out the wood between the cuts, forming a rough trough. This first notch isn't aesthetically pleasing, but it doesn't need to be. It simply needs to securely hold the next log. The sun climbs higher, melting some of the snow, but its warmth is a weak illusion. Your back is slick with sweat despite the cold, and you pause occasionally to drink from the perpetually icy spring. The work is agonizingly slow, demanding exacting precision. Each notch demands at least 20 minutes of careful, deliberate chopping. Hold up a second. Allow me to paint you a vivid, unvarnished picture of this moment. You stand in a small, hard-won clearing, encircled by towering, silent pines. The distant mountains rise like stoic blue giants, eternally watchful. The fresh snow, a pristine blanket, covers everything save for the immediate circle around your dwindling fire and the raw, exposed areas where you've been toiling. Your breath, a visible ghost, clouds perpetually in front of you. Your hands are raw, leaving undeniable smears of crimson on the pale, vulnerable wood. Every few minutes, you halt your brutal work to wipe sweat from your eyes with the sleeve already stiff with frozen perspiration. A solitary hawk circles overhead, effortlessly riding the thermal currents, perhaps wondering what this peculiar, determined two-legged creature is doing. The only sounds are the rhythmic, hungry bite of your axe into wood, your own ragged, labored breathing, and occasionally, the distant, mournful howl of a wolf. This, my friends, is the profound, unyielding meaning of solitude. Not an hour disconnected from your phone. I am speaking of absolute, complete isolation from humanity. It is just you, the formidable mountains, and the chilling, ever-present knowledge that, if you fail, no one will ever find your body. By noon, you have meticulously positioned and notched the 4 base logs. The very foundation of your cabin, your sanctuary, is undeniably beginning to take shape. It is a simple rectangle, starkly marked out on the snowy ground, yet you are only just commencing this monumental task. You desperately need more trees. The 7 you felled yesterday are woefully insufficient. Surveying your meager progress, you grimly estimate you'll require at least 15 more for the walls alone, plus additional timber for the roof. You trudge resolutely through the snow, axe slung over your shoulder, relentlessly searching for the perfect trees. Not just any tree will suffice. You demand straight ones, exhibiting minimal taper, ideally about a foot in diameter, pines preferred for their inherent straight grain and formidable natural resistance to rot. I consulted a forestry expert who meticulously studied the cabins built by these mountain men, and he revealed a fascinating detail. These guys were incredibly selective. They could glance at a stand of 100 trees and instantly pinpoint the 5 worth cutting. They weren't merely lumberjacks. They were master craftsmen who understood their materials intimately. You spot a perfect candidate, a lodgepole pine, approximately 14 inches at its base, arrow straight with minimal branches on its lower trunk. You carefully scan the surrounding area to ensure a clear fall path. Then, with renewed determination, you begin chopping. Your technique has demonstrably improved since yesterday. You carve the directional notch on the fall side more quickly now, precisely angling your cuts to create a meticulous wedge. Then you shift to the backside, making a slightly higher horizontal cut. The tree begins to creak, a chilling protest. You step back, vigilant, watching the top for any subtle sign of movement. There is a moment of profound stillness, then a sharp, resonant crack. The pine begins its unstoppable descent, gathering terrifying speed, its branches rushing through the air with a sound like tearing fabric. It falls exactly where you intended, crashing through the smaller trees in its path. finally coming to rest with a ground-shaking thud that sends a puff of snow billowing into the air. One down. Many more such victories are desperately needed. The day settles into a brutal, monotonous rhythm. Fell, limb, debark, repeat. Your body moves on autopilot, a machine fueled by grim necessity, while your mind drifts, a desperate escape. You yearn for the warm, bustling trading posts down on the Missouri, with their roaring fires and comforting barrels of whiskey. You conjure images of St. Louis, with its vibrant bustle and noise, its women in calico dresses. It all seems like a distant, impossible dream now. I unearthed this poignant letter from a mountain man to his sister back east. Sometimes I wonder if the towns still exist, or if they've all vanished like morning mist. The wilderness has a way of making civilization seem like a story someone told you once. By mid-afternoon, you've added 3 more colossal trees to your dwindling stockpile. Your hands have transcended mere pain, entering a realm of numb, detached agony. Blood has soaked through your buckskin gloves, rendering the axe handle sticky and treacherous. You've ceased to register the cold, save for the brutal, biting gusts of wind. The sky is darkening once more, not merely with the approach of evening, but with the unmistakable advance of more ominous weather. The storm is relentlessly building, layers of heavy, pregnant clouds rolling in from the northwest. You might, have one more day before it unleashes its full, devastating force. You turn your attention back to the cabin site. With the foundational base logs finally in place, you must now begin the arduous process of building upward. This is where the true challenge intensifies. Raising these massive logs alone is absolutely backbreaking work. For the next level, you meticulously cut a sloping ramp from smaller logs, creating a rough incline leading up to the top of the base logs. Then, with agonizing, solitary effort, you laboriously roll the next log up this precarious ramp, your shoulder serving as the primary protesting power source. The first one nearly defeats you entirely. Halfway up the ramp, the log shifts unexpectedly, almost rolling back over you with crushing force. You leap aside just in time, watching in furious despair as it crashes back to the ground, obliterating a section of your painstakingly constructed ramp. Son of a, you snarl, kicking at the snow in a burst of impotent frustration. I read a harrowing account from a trapper who described this exact, terrifying problem. Raising logs alone is a dance with death. One slip, and 2,000 pounds of pine will snap your spine like a twig. I saw a man near Fort Hall crushed flat when his log rolled. We buried what was left of him in a shallow grave and divided his possessions. That's frontier justice. With grim resolve, you rebuild the ramp, making it less steep, and attempt the perilous task again. This time, you ingeniously use a rope, crudely looped around the log, to help control its treacherous ascent as you roll it upward. Your progress is agonizingly slow, each inch a monumental triumph, but finally, the log reaches the top of the ramp and settles with a satisfying thud into the notches painstakingly carved into the base. Logs, success. One wall now stands 2 logs high. The remainder of the afternoon dissolves into a blur of searing sweat and raw strain. You manage to raise just 1 more log on each wall before the inexorable darkness begins to fall. The temperature plummets with the setting sun, and the wind intensifies, driving icy needles of snow against your exposed face. Your fingers are numb, useless claws, and your lips are cracked and bleeding from the brutal cold and profound dehydration. When you finally halt your labor, your legs nearly buckle beneath you. The cabin, your nascent sanctuary, is truly taking shape. A rectangle of logs, too high, the desperate beginnings of what will be your fortress against the coming winter. But it is nowhere near complete. At your current solo pace, you grimly estimate 3 more days of brutal work before it is even marginally habitable. The terrifying question is whether the storm will grant you that precious time. You gather precious firewood, armloads of branches from the trees you felled, and build your fire to a roaring blaze. Tonight will be far colder than last night, and you desperately need every single calorie of warmth you can coax from the flames. Sitting by the fire, you pull off your buckskin gloves to inspect your ravaged hands. They are a catastrophic mess. Blisters upon blisters, some broken and weeping, others swollen with fluid. Your palms are a tortured crisscross of cuts from bark and embedded splinters. You pour a little precious water over them, not for comfort, but to clean away the blood and grit. Then you hold them close to the ravenous flames, welcoming the stinging, agonizing pain that signals the return of feeling. Your muscles are trembling uncontrollably with exhaustion, and hunger gnaws with predatory intent at your belly. You force yourself to eat sparingly, just enough jerky to maintain your fading strength. When that runs out, you will have to hunt, but that is a problem for another day. As darkness settles fully over the forest, you wrap yourself in your blanket and collapse beside the fire. The day's brutal work has left you too utterly exhausted to even register discomfort. Sleep claims you almost instantly, dragging you down into absolute blackness. But even in sleep, your mind remains relentlessly active, solving problems, planning tomorrow's monumental labor, how to raise the walls higher, how to create the crucial gable ends, how to fashion a roof that will not collapse under the inevitable weight of snow. Because out here, survival demands that even your most desperate dreams must be intensely practical. Unlike your cozy bed right now, with its soft mattress and warm covers, your sleep is light, fractured, hyper-alert, ready to awaken at any sound that signifies danger. The piercing scream of mountain lions, the haunting howl of wolves, or far worse, the unnervingly soft footfall of an approaching grizzly, drawn by the undeniable scent of man. This is where we will pause for tonight. Tomorrow, we will discover if our mountain man can truly raise those walls before the full, devastating force of the storm descends. But for now, allow the gentle, reassuring weight of your blankets to remind you of the immense chasm between our present comfort and those desperate days when shelter was not a luxury, but the absolute, stark demarcation between life and death. Truly imagine as you drift towards sleep, the profound weight of knowing your very survival hinges entirely on what your own two hands can construct before the storm's furious arrival. A distinctive sound jolts you awake. Not the wind, not a wild animal, but something else entirely. You lie perfectly still, eyes closed, every sense straining. There it is again, the unmistakable crunch of snow under a moccasin. Someone or something is approaching your camp. Your hand instinctively slides to your rifle, fingers wrapping around the cold, reassuring metal of the barrel. Out here, visitors are rarely benevolent. It could be Blackfoot warriors who have claimed the lives of countless trappers in these unforgiving mountains. It could be desperate claim jumpers seeking to pilfer the meager possessions you've painstakingly acquired. Or, perhaps most terrifyingly, it could be a rogue grizzly, though they should be in hibernation by now. The footsteps halt. Then, a voice, rough but undeniably human, cuts through the frigid air. "Hello, the camp. Coming in friendly." You sit up slowly, rifle ready, but not yet aimed. Show yourselves. Two figures emerge from the tree line, their breath pluming in the bitter morning air. They are men in buckskins, each armed with a rifle and an axe, trappers by their rugged appearance. One is tall and lanky, with a grizzled beard cascading to his chest. The other, shorter, stockier, with a face so profoundly weathered it looks carved from the very mountains themselves. "Name's Fitzgerald," says the tall one, his voice a gravelly rumble. "This here's Cooper. Spotted your smoke yesterday evening. Thought we'd check if you were alive or dead. I've immersed myself in dozens of trapper journals, and this scenario was far more common than you might imagine. In the vast, lonely wilderness, trappers would sometimes actively seek each other out, especially with winter's harsh embrace approaching. There was safety in numbers, a crucial sharing of skills, and perhaps most importantly, the profound human need to simply hear another voice after months of soul-crushing isolation. You lower your rifle slightly, but maintain a watchful grip. Trust is a scarce, hard-won commodity in these mountains. What brings you boys this far up?" Cooper spits a stream of tobacco juice into the pristine snow. "Beaver Creek down yonder's lousy with 'em. But that storm coming ain't no joke. Saw you was building. Figured maybe we could lend a hand, make it go faster." You study them intently. Their gear is worn, but meticulously maintained. There are no telltale signs of the desperation that might render them dangerous. And the undeniable truth is, you desperately need the help. "Coffee is ready if you want some," you offer, nodding towards your small, flickering fire, as close to a warm welcome as you are capable of extending. You know what's truly remarkable? I discovered this letter in a historical archive where a mountain man wrote to his brother. "Met two fellows building a cabin near the Yellowstone. We helped raise their walls in exchange for coffee and conversation. Neither of us mentioned how we nearly shot each other at first light. Some things don't need saying out here." Fitzgerald and Cooper huddle by your fire, gratefully accepting the tin cups of black coffee you offer. The liquid is bitter and strong, boiled multiple times from the same grounds, yet its heat is a profound luxury in this frigid expanse. As dawn fully breaks, painting the sky with hesitant hues, you study your new companions. Both men bear the hard, lean imprint of those who have not merely survived, but mastered multiple winters in the high country. Their buckskins are a mosaic of patches and stains, their faces wind-burned and etched with the indelible lines of relentless struggle. Yet their eyes are clear, sharp, and intensely alert, the eyes of men who have learned to perceive danger long before it perceives them. "That's a good start you got there," Fitzgerald observes, his gaze sweeping over your half-built cabin. "But them walls need to be higher before that storm hits proper." Cooper grunts in agreement, a terse confirmation. "Reckon we can get it done today if we all pitch in." You are not a man who trusts easily, but here, survival unequivocally trumps suspicion. And 3 men can undeniably accomplish in a single day what would consume 3 of your own solitary, arduous days. "Got tools for all of us?" you inquire. Cooper pats the axe hanging from his belt, a gesture of unwavering familiarity. "Never go anywhere without old Betsy here." Fitzgerald stretches his lanky frame and rises, a man of purpose. "Let's get to it then." Daylight's burning. I interviewed an expert on frontier cooperation at the Wyoming Historical Society, and she emphasized the absolute criticality of these temporary partnerships for survival. Men who would typically compete fiercely for trapping territory would set aside their rivalries to unite in building cabins, hunting game, or fending off threats. Afterward, they would inevitably go their separate ways, sometimes without even learning each other's true names. With the crucial addition of Fitzgerald and Cooper, the work ignites with a new, powerful rhythm. Fitzgerald, it quickly becomes apparent, is a seasoned architect of the wild, having constructed more than a few cabins in his time. He demonstrates a superior technique for notching, what he terms the saddle notch. "See, you don't want to cut straight across," he explains, expertly demonstrating with his axe. "You want to round it like this, so the log above sits snug. Keeps the wind out better." His technique creates a gracefully curved depression at the end of each log, perfectly shaped to cradle the crossing log. It is a deceptively simple, yet profoundly effective method, the kind of invaluable knowledge that can only be forged through relentless, hard-won experience. Cooper, meanwhile, proves to be a master of raw power and ingenious leverage, his stocky, formidable build making light work of raising logs. He devises a clever lever system, utilizing smaller logs as fulcrums to lift the immense pine trunks into their precise positions. "Learned this from the Frenchies down on the Mississippi," he grunts, throwing his full weight onto the lever, effortlessly raising a log that would have consumed hours of your solitary struggle. Work smarter, not harder. The morning dissolves into a blur of coordinated, efficient effort. Logs that would have taken you a full, exhausting day to raise are now ascending into place every hour. The walls climb steadily, 3 logs high, then 4, a testament to collaborative power. "You planning a fireplace?" Fitzgerald asks during a brief, much-needed water break. "East wall," you reply, pointing. "Figured I'd use those rocks from the creek bed." He nods approvingly, a subtle sign of respect. "Smart. We should leave the opening now, save you having to cut it later." You, so utterly fixated on simply getting the walls erected, hadn't considered that far ahead. But he is undeniably correct. It is infinitely easier to build asterisk around asterisk the fireplace opening than to laboriously cut through completed walls. Want to hear something truly wild? During an archaeological dig at an 1830s trapper cabin in Wyoming, researchers unearthed a fireplace foundation that astonishingly included buffalo bones and elk antlers mixed with the stones. The trapper, in an act of sheer frontier ingenuity, had utilized whatever materials were at his immediate disposal. Talk about resourcefulness born of necessity. By midday, you've established a seamless, almost intuitive workflow. Cooper, a force of nature, fells and limbs trees with brutal efficiency. You debark and perform the initial, rough notching. Fitzgerald, the seasoned artisan, executes the final, precise notching and directs the meticulous placement of each log. The cabin walls now stand 5 logs high, a formidable barrier taller than a man. The sky has darkened even further, and the wind carries the unmistakable chilling scent of snow. Fat flakes begin to fall, slowly at first, then with increasing, relentless steadiness. "She's coming on faster than I figured," Cooper observes, his gaze scanning the sky with a grim frown. Fitzgerald nods, his expression equally somber. "We've got maybe 5 hours of daylight left. Need to get them walls up to full height and start on the roof, or all this works for nothing." The urgent mention of a roof introduces a daunting new challenge. You've been so utterly focused on the walls that you haven't fully conceived of the roof structure. Building a proper pitched roof demands rafters, beams, and an entirely new level of complex notching. Ever built a roof before? Fitzgerald asks, seemingly reading your unspoken apprehension. You shake your head. "First cabin," he spits into the snow, a pragmatic gesture. "Well, you picked a hell of a time to learn." but we'll get you squared away. As the afternoon relentlessly wears on, the snowfall intensifies. You work through it, oblivious to the penetrating wet and cold. Your hands, already ravaged by days of brutal labor, begin to bleed anew, but you barely register the pain. There is only the work. The next log, the next notch, the next wall section. Cooper pauses to chew another plug of tobacco, his eyes critically assessing the rising walls. Going to need a ridge beam, something solid, and rafters coming down from it. Fitzgerald points to a tall straight pine at the edge of the clearing. That one there would make a good ridge. Needs to be longer than the cabin. The three of you, now a unified, unstoppable force, tackle the designated tree, a massive pine nearly 2 feet thick at the base. With Cooper and Fitzgerald working in perfect tandem on opposite sides, the tree falls in minutes, rather than the solitary hour it would have taken you alone. Now for the tricky part, Fitzgerald says, wiping sweat from his brow despite the biting cold. We need to get this big bastard up on top of them walls. I spent a week with a historical reconstruction team in Montana, and they meticulously demonstrated how mountain men ingeniously solved this problem. The expert told me, without cranes or pulleys, they relied on pure physics and brute muscle. They'd create what we call a dead man, essentially, a log buried perpendicular to the cabin that they could use as an anchor point for ropes and levers. It was incredibly dangerous work. Cooper surveys the site, then points to a spot about 20 feet from the cabin. We dig a hole there, bury a log halfway as an anchor, use ropes to guide the ridge beam up while we push from below. It's an ingenious solution, though brutally labor-intensive. The three of you spend the next hour digging through the frozen ground to create the crucial anchor point, then meticulously setting up the complex lifting system. Ground's harder than a heart, Cooper grunts as his axe bounces off the frozen earth. Your experience with hearts is extensive, I take it, Fitzgerald replies dryly. Cooper shoots him a glare, then laughs, a rough, rusty sound, like he doesn't often use it. More than yours, you skinny bastard. This banter, crude as it is, reminds you of something you've been desperately missing out here alone, human connection. Even this rough joking feels like a profound balm for the soul after weeks of crushing silence. With the anchor finally set, you begin the perilous, dangerous process of raising the ridge beam. Cooper and Fitzgerald have expertly fashioned a crude, yet robust, rope from rawhide strips, looping it securely around the heavy log. You position yourself at the bottom end, ready to push upward with every ounce of your being, while they control its descent from the anchor point. On 3, Fitzgerald calls out, his voice cutting through the wind. 1.2.3. You heave with all your might, your muscles screaming in agonizing protest as the massive log begins to move. Inch by excruciating inch, the ridge beam rises, a monumental struggle against gravity. Your vision narrows, fixated solely on this one critical task, this precise moment. Nothing exists but the searing burn in your shoulders and back, the rough bark tearing at your palms, the desperate, primal need to keep the log moving upward. Steady, Cooper shouts as the beam wavers slightly. Don't let it roll. A log of this immense size, if it were to roll now, would instantly crush anyone in its path. The terrifying thought sends a fresh surge of adrenaline and strength through your utterly spent body. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the ridge beam reaches the dizzying height of the walls. With careful, synchronized coordination, the three of you maneuver it into its precise position along the central axis of the cabin. Hold it there. Fitzgerald calls, scrambling up the walls with surprising agility for a man his age. He quickly lashes the beam into place with more rawhide strips, securing it temporarily until it can be properly notched and permanently set. The sky is growing ominously darker, both from the relentless approach of evening and the intensifying fury of the storm. The snow is falling steadily now, accumulating on your shoulders and head as you relentlessly work. Need to get them rafters up before full dark, Cooper states, already moving to cut the smaller logs that will form the roof's crucial framework. You have never worked so hard or so fast in your entire life. With Fitzgerald directing, you and Cooper cut and position rafters, logs approximately 6 inches in diameter that extend from the ridge beam down to the top of the walls at an angle, forming the pitched roof structure. Each rafter must be meticulously notched at both ends, at the ridge beam and at the wall top, to prevent it from sliding. It is precise, demanding work, made exponentially more difficult by the fading light and the worsening, brutal weather. I once asked a historian about how these men endured and worked in such impossible conditions. He told me they didn't have the luxury of waiting for good weather. If a storm was coming and you didn't have shelter, you worked through snow, sleet, whatever came. Men who couldn't or wouldn't do that simply didn't survive to tell their tales. As darkness begins to fall in earnest, you have the basic roof structure in place, the ridge beam and rafters forming a sturdy A-frame. It is not complete. You still need cross pieces and some kind of covering, but it is enough that you can finish it tomorrow, even in heavy snow. That'll hold for tonight, Fitzgerald says, surveying your monumental work with obvious, quiet satisfaction. Still needs a proper covering, but it'll keep the worst of the snow off. Cooper has already started a fire inside the cabin's dirt floor. Without a proper chimney yet, smoke fills the upper portion of the space, but it is infinitely better than being fully exposed to the elements. Might get a bit smoky, he admits, but better than freezing solid. The three of you huddle inside the half-finished structure, passing a flask of whiskey that Cooper produces from inside his buckskins. The amber liquid burns going down, but spreads a welcome, profound warmth through your utterly exhausted body. Not bad for a day's work, Fitzgerald says, looking up at the roof framework, silhouetted against the rapidly darkening sky. Snow drifts down between the rafters, melting instantly in the heat from the fire. Would have taken me days on my own, you admit, taking another small, grateful sip of whiskey before passing the flask back. Cooper shrugs, a gesture of deep understanding. Man alone out here is just waiting to die. Ain't natural. There's profound truth in his words. Humans are social creatures. Even the most fiercely independent mountain men. Complete isolation for too long can wear down even the strongest spirit. I discovered this fascinating letter from a trapper to his wife back east. Today 3 strangers helped me build my winter cabin. Tomorrow they'll be gone, and I may never see them again. But for one day, I remembered what it was to be part of mankind. Not just a solitary animal in these mountains. As night fully descends, the storm intensifies. Wind howls through the incomplete roof, a mournful, hungry sound. But the walls, your walls, block the worst of its fury. The fire casts dancing, flickering shadows on the log walls, and for the very first time in weeks, you feel something profoundly close to safe. You got a name? Fitzgerald asks finally, breaking a long, comfortable silence. You tell them well, he says. You picked a hell of a spot for your first cabin. Good water, good timber, decent protection from the north wind. You might just make it through winter. Coming from a veteran mountain man, it is the highest, most coveted praise imaginable. Cooper has pulled out some dried venison, tougher and darker than your jerky. He cuts 3 roughly equal pieces with his knife and passes them around. It's like chewing leather, but it is sustenance you didn't have to provide yourself, which somehow makes it taste exquisitely better. Storm will blow itself out in a day or 2, he says between bites. We'll get that roof properly covered tomorrow. Maybe start on your fireplace if there's time. Why are you helping me? The question escapes you before you can stop it, raw and unbidden. Fitzgerald and Cooper exchange a glance, a silent, profound understanding passing between them. It's Cooper who answers, his voice gruff but clear. Same reason anyone does anything out here. Self-interest. He takes another bite of venison. Next time might be us needs help. Way it works, Fitzgerald nods. Mountain law. Today, you. Tomorrow, me. It is as simple and as profoundly complicated as that. Out here, where death is always just one mistake away, cooperation is not charity. It is unequivocally insurance. The fire crackles, sending sparks dancing up toward the open rafters. Outside, the world has disappeared into a swirling, blinding white void of snow and impenetrable darkness. But inside these 4 walls you built with your own hands, there's warmth, food, and for tonight at least a priceless companionship. You realize with a strange sense of victory that your hands have stopped bleeding. The constant, brutal work has finally calloused them enough that the splits and blisters are beginning their slow, painful healing. Another small but monumental victory. As exhaustion pulls you towards sleep, you look around at what you've accomplished. Just days ago, these logs were living trees. Now they are the desperate beginning of a home, a fortress against the brutal, unforgiving winter ahead. Fitzgerald and Cooper are already snoring, rolled in their blankets on opposite sides of the fire, their presence a palpable comfort. Tomorrow will bring more backbreaking labor, but tonight, for the very first time, you sleep inside walls of your own making. Unlike your cozy modern bedroom right now, where temperature is controlled with the touch of a button, here the fire must be fed throughout the long, cold night. The smoke makes your eyes water and your chest tight. The ground is still hard beneath you, but the walls break the wind's cruel bite, and the rafters catch most of the falling snow. It's not comfort by any modern standard, but in the wilderness, it is the absolute stark difference between life and death. And as sleep finally claims you, one thought circles in your mind. Asterisk, I might just survive this winter after all. Asterisk, that night, as the storm rages outside and the fire burns low, you dream not of civilization and its fleeting comforts, but of your cabin completed with a proper roof, a formidable stone fireplace, maybe even a rough-hewn table and chair. The dream is not of escaping the wilderness, but of asterisk mastering asterisk it, one grueling log at a time. Something cold and wet strikes your face, jolting you abruptly awake, disoriented. Another drop lands on your forehead, melted snow, dripping inexorably through the incomplete roof. The fire has dwindled to mere embers, casting the cabin in a dim, ruddy glow. Outside, the wind howls like a living, enraged entity, furious at being denied entry. Cooper and Fitzgerald are already awake, huddled near the fire's dying remnants. Cooper pokes at the coals with his stick, patiently coaxing them back to life, while Fitzgerald feeds in small, precious pieces of kindling. "Morning," Fitzgerald says, noting your awakening, his voice rough with sleep. "Hope you weren't planning on sleeping in," Cooper grunts. Storm's getting worse. We got work to do. You sit up, every muscle screaming in agonizing protest. Despite the nascent shelter, you are cold and damp. The incomplete roof allowed enough snow to sift in during the night that everything has a thin, chilling coating of white. Going to need that roof done today, you state the obvious, the words tasting like ice. Fitzgerald nods. And that fireplace. Can't keep having fires on the dirt floor. Smoke's got nowhere to go. The cabin is indeed hazy with smoke, stinging your eyes and making your throat raw. A proper chimney would draw it up and out. But that means stonework, yet another crucial skill you've never had to master before. I studied an 1830s trapper's journal at the Montana Historical Society. The man wrote, "Built my fireplace twice. First one smoked so bad, I nearly suffocated. Tore it down and started over, making the chimney taller and the throat narrower. Second one worked like a charm. Learned that lesson the hard way, like everything else out here. Such vital lessons were carved from brutal experience. You chew the last, precious strip of your jerky for breakfast, washing it down with melted snow, heated over the rekindled fire. Cooper produces more dried venison from his pack, sharing it without a word, an act of silent solidarity. The meat is tough, almost unyielding, but profoundly nourishing." Fitzgerald, meanwhile, has a small pouch of parched corn that he meticulously mixes with hot water to create a crude but fortifying porridge. He offers you a spoonful, which you gratefully accept. "After we get the roof on," Cooper says between bites, "I'll try to get us some fresh meat. Saw deer sign by the creek." "Good," Fitzgerald replies. "Men can't work on jerky alone. Not in this cold." With meager food in your belly and the fire providing some desperately needed warmth, you all prepare for the day's monumental work. The storm has indeed intensified overnight. When you push open the makeshift door, just a piece of canvas stretched over the opening, you are met with an impenetrable wall of white. The snow is falling so heavily that you can barely discern the trees at the edge of the clearing. "Jesus," you mutter, pulling your head back inside, a chilling realization. Cooper peers past you. "Seeing worse, but not much. Roof first," Fitzgerald says decisively. "Then the fireplace. If we're lucky, we'll have both done by nightfall. I spent an entire winter alone in these mountains with nothing but a history book and a journal. I vividly recall an account from a mountain man named Osborne Russell who wrote, 'The hardest part of winter isn't the cold or the hunger. It's the silence. You start talking to yourself just to hear a human voice. By February, you're having full conversations with your rifle. Stepping outside is like entering another hostile world. The snow is knee-deep in places, sculpted into treacherous drifts by the relentless wind. The cold cuts through your buckskins like a razor-sharp knife. But there's work to be done, monumental work, and no one to do it but the three of you. First order of business, covering the roof. The rafters are in place, but they desperately need cross pieces and some kind of waterproof layer. Purlins, Fitzgerald says, gesturing to the smaller logs you'll need to cut for the cross pieces. We'll lay them across the rafters, then cover the whole thing with bark or boughs. Cooper is already moving toward a stand of younger trees at the edge of the clearing. These saplings will do. Straight, flexible. With axes in hand, you and Cooper begin felling the smaller trees, none more than 6 inches in diameter. They come down easily, requiring just a few decisive strokes each. Fitzgerald, meanwhile, begins stripping large sheets of bark from some of the logs you felled previously but haven't used yet. Pine bark makes a decent roof in a pinch, he explains, working his axe carefully under the thick outer layer of a fallen trunk. Peel it off in big sheets, overlap them like shingles. Won't last forever, but it'll keep the snow out till spring. I spoke with a wilderness survival expert who specializes in historical techniques, and he explained that bark roofing was common among mountain men. They typically used whatever was readily available: pine, spruce, or cedar. The crucial trick was peeling it in the largest possible sheets and overlapping them from the bottom up, just like modern shingles. In dry conditions, these crude roofs could astonishingly last several seasons. Working in the deepening snow is utterly exhausting. Your boots are soaked through, your fingers numb despite your gloves, but the three of you establish a brutal rhythm. Cooper cuts. You haul. Fitzgerald positions. By midday, you've laid all the purlins, the smaller logs running horizontally across the rafters, creating a crucial framework for the bark covering. The next step is lifting the heavy sheets of bark up onto the roof. This is treacherous, as the bark is surprisingly heavy, especially when wet with snow. It also breaks easily if bent too far. Careful with that, Fitzgerald cautions as you struggle to hoist a large section. We ain't got time to peel more. Cooper quickly fashions a crude ladder from smaller logs, lashed together with rawhide strips. With this, Fitzgerald can carefully climb onto the roof while you and Cooper pass up the heavy bark sheets. The process is agonizingly slow and precarious. Fitzgerald balances precariously on the rafters and purlins, his footing uncertain on the snow-slick wood. One wrong step would send him crashing to the cabin floor, 8 feet below. Pass that big piece. He calls down, gesturing to a sheet of bark nearly 6 feet long. You and Cooper lift it together, struggling against its awkward weight and the relentless, gusting wind that seems determined to tear it from your grasp. Fitzgerald leans down from the roof edge, his fingers grasping desperately for the bark. For a heart-stopping moment, he slips, one foot sliding off the purlin. He throws his weight backward, barely catching himself, a gasp tearing from his throat. "Son of a bitch!" he gasps, regaining his precarious balance. Cooper shakes his head. "Told you you're too old for roof work. And I told you to kiss my ass," Fitzgerald retorts, but there's no real heat in his words. These men have clearly endured and worked together before. I discovered a memoir from a trapper named William Hamilton, who vividly described a close call during cabin building. "Slipped from the roof beam, caught myself by one arm, dangled there 20 feet up, certain I was bound for glory. Jenkins grabbed my wrist and hauled me back up like I was no heavier than a rabbit. Never said a word about it after. Just expected the same from me when his time came. By early afternoon, half the roof is covered. The overlapping bark sheets aren't pretty, but they are profoundly functional. Where the bark doesn't quite meet, Fitzgerald meticulously stuffs the gaps with moss and pine needles, natural insulation that will help keep precious heat in and insidious snow out. While Fitzgerald continues working on the roof, you and Cooper turn your attention to the fireplace. This is perhaps the most crucial element of the cabin. Without proper heat, winter in these mountains is an absolute, undeniable death sentence. The east wall has been deliberately left with an opening about 4 feet wide, framed by shorter logs specifically cut for this purpose. This will be the fireplace and chimney. Need rocks, Cooper says, heading toward the creek that runs about 50 yards from the cabin site. Big ones for the base, smaller for the chimney. You follow him, both of you trudging through the relentless snow. The creek is partially frozen, its edges crusted with ice, but the center still flows dark and swift, a ribbon of life. Along its banks, smooth river rocks of various sizes are half buried in snow. Cooper points to the largest. We'll start with them, build up from there. The rocks are incredibly heavy, some weighing well over 100 pounds. You dig them from the snow with your bare hands, then roll them with agonizing effort up the slight incline toward the cabin. It's backbreaking work, made worse by the brutal cold and the awkward footing in the deep snow. By the time you've gathered enough rocks for the base, your hands are raw and bleeding again, despite your gloves, but there's no time to rest. Cooper is already meticulously arranging the largest stones in a semicircle against the east wall opening. We'll need mud for mortar, he says, looking around. Ground's frozen though. Could melt snow and mix it with dirt from the cabin floor? You suggest. A flicker of ingenuity. He nods approvingly. That'll work. Got any clay nearby? Clay would make superior mortar than simple mud, but you haven't seen any in your desperate exploration of the area. Don't think so. Dirt will have to do then, Cooper says pragmatically. Might need to add some pine needles for binding. My pa used to do that back in Kentucky. You know what's truly wild? I came across this letter from a settler describing a trapper's fireplace. The strange man had mixed deer blood with his mud mortar. Said it made it set harder, whether true or superstition, I cannot say. But that fireplace stood strong while the rest of the cabin eventually rotted away. While Cooper continues arranging the base stones, you gather dirt from the cabin floor, scraping away the top layer to reach the unfrozen soil beneath. You fill a pot with snow and set it by the small fire still burning inside, letting it melt into precious water. Outside, the storm shows no signs of abating. The wind drives the snow horizontally at times, a blinding, furious white, and the temperature continues to plummet. Your breath freezes instantly in your beard, forming ice crystals that clink together when you move your head. Fitzgerald has nearly finished the roof, working methodically from one end to the other, overlapping each bark sheet with the next. Despite the brutal conditions, his work is precise, born of years of relentless experience. Almost done up here. He calls down. How's that fireplace coming? Getting there, Cooper replies, not looking up from his painstaking stonework. You mix the melted snow with the dirt, creating a thick, sticky mud. Following Cooper's suggestion, you add a handful of pine needles, stirring them in with a stick. The resulting mixture isn't pretty, but it holds together when you squeeze it. Functional, if crude. That'll do, Cooper says when you bring it to him. He scoops a handful and begins packing it between the stones, creating a crude but effective mortar. The base of the fireplace, your central hearth, slowly takes shape, a semicircular arrangement of large, flat stones extending about 2 feet into the cabin. On this formidable foundation, Cooper begins building upward, using progressively smaller stones. Need a good deep firebox, he explains. Heat bounces off the back wall, radiates into the cabin. Too shallow, and all your heat goes up the chimney. I interviewed a historical reconstruction specialist who emphasized the crucial angle of the firebox. Mountain men learned, often through brutal trial and error, that the back wall should angle forward slightly as it rises. This ingenious design reflects more heat into the room. It's a principle we still utilize in modern fireplace design, a testament to their profound practical wisdom. As the afternoon relentlessly wears on, your work falls into a steady, punishing rhythm. Cooper builds the fireplace stone by stone. You mix more mud mortar and fetch more rocks from the creek. Fitzgerald completes the roof covering and begins working on a proper door. A simple but solid affair made from split logs lashed together with rawhide. The physical labor warms you despite the cold, but whenever you pause, the chill seeps back into your very bones immediately. Your feet are blocks of ice inside your wet boots, and your fingers are so numb you can barely feel the stones you're handling. "How long you been out here?" Cooper asks suddenly, breaking a long, companionable silence. 3 months, you reply. "Came up from Fort Union in August," he nods. "First winter in these mountains?" "Yeah." Cooper and Fitzgerald exchange a glance that speaks volumes, a shared understanding of profound peril. First winters are when most men die. "You're doing all right," Fitzgerald says, in what seems to be high praise coming from him. "Picked a good spot, building solid." The approval from these veteran mountain men means more than you'd like to admit. "I found this journal entry from a first-year trapper. Birch inspected my cabin today. Thought they'd laugh at my crude work, but just nodded and said, 'You'll live.' From him, that was like a governor's commendation. By late afternoon, the fireplace has triumphantly reached the height of the walls. Now comes the truly tricky part, the chimney. It must extend above the roofline and draw properly, or the cabin will simply fill with suffocating smoke. Cooper fashions a crude scaffolding outside the east wall, allowing him to continue building upward. The chimney narrows as it rises, expertly forcing the smoke to accelerate and draw better. "Make it too wide, smoke won't rise proper," he explains. "Too narrow, it'll clog with creosote and catch fire." Inside, you line the firebox with the flattest stones you could find, creating a relatively smooth interior that will reflect heat efficiently. The back wall angles forward slightly, precisely following Cooper's expert instructions. As daylight begins to fade, far too early this time of year, Fitzgerald completes the door and hangs it on leather hinges. It's rough work, but it swings freely and, most importantly, will keep out the brutal wind and cold. "Need a latch?" he mutters, looking around for suitable material. "Will this work?" you ask, offering a piece of antler you've been carrying, a lucky find from earlier in the fall. Fitzgerald examines it, then nods. "Perfect." With his knife, he carves a simple but profoundly effective latch mechanism. The antler piece pivots on a wooden peg, dropping into a notch to securely close the door. Outside, Cooper has finished the chimney. It rises about 3 feet above the roofline, crowned with a crude cap of flat stones to keep out the worst of the snow while still allowing smoke to escape. "Moment of truth," he says, climbing down from his precarious scaffolding. Inside, you lay a fire in the new fireplace. Small at first, to let the mud mortar dry gradually. All 3 of you watch anxiously as the flames catch. For a heart-stopping moment, smoke billows into the cabin and your heart sinks with despair. But then, as the fire grows stronger, the smoke begins to draw upward, pulled by the powerful draft of the properly constructed chimney. "There she goes," Fitzgerald says with profound satisfaction as the smoke disappears up the chimney, leaving the cabin air relatively clear for the very first time. It's a triumph, small in the grand scheme of things perhaps, but monumental in your current, desperate circumstances. You have walls to break the wind's cruel bite, a roof to keep out the suffocating snow, and now a fireplace that provides both life-saving heat and crucial cooking capability. Cooper grins, the first genuine smile you've seen from him. "Reckon we earned our supper." While the new fireplace fills the cabin with vital heat, Cooper heads out to check the snares he set earlier near the creek. He returns within the hour, snow-covered but triumphant, carrying a pair of snowshoe hares. "Fresh meat," he announces, holding up his prize. The prospect of something other than jerky and dried venison is almost dizzying in its promise. Your mouth waters as Cooper expertly skins and cleans the hares, then spits them on green sticks to roast slowly over the fire. The aroma that fills the cabin is intoxicating, rich, wild, and profoundly satisfying. The three of you sit around the fireplace, watching the meat brown slowly, fat dripping and sizzling on the hot stones below. When the hares are done, Cooper divides them with his knife, a leg and a portion of back meat for each of you. There are no plates, so you eat with your fingers, the hot, flavorful meat burning your tongue in your eagerness. It's the best meal you've had in months. I read a letter from a mountain man to his sister back east. "You would laugh to see us eat. Eliza, no china, no silver, not even a table. Just three rough men squatting by the fire, grease running down our beards, gnawing meat from the bone like wolves. And yet, I tell you true, no fancy dinner in St. Louis ever tasted so fine as fresh rabbit in a cabin you built with your own hands." Outside, the storm has reached its terrifying peak. The wind screams around the cabin corners, searching for weaknesses, finding few. Some snow still sifts through the bark roof in places, but it's minimal. Nothing like the brutal open exposure of previous nights. The fireplace radiates a steady, penetrating heat that drives the chill from the small space. For the first time since you entered these mountains, you feel something approaching genuine security. Fitzgerald pulls out his tobacco pouch, offering it around. You and Cooper each take a small pinch, savoring the small, profound luxury. The three of you sit in companionable silence, smoking and watching the mesmerizing dance of the fire. "You boys heading back to your own camp tomorrow?" you ask finally, breaking a long, comfortable quiet. Cooper glances at Fitzgerald, who shrugs. "Storm might keep up another day. No point fighting through it if we don't have to. Could help you finish up in here. Floor, sleeping platform, maybe some shelves, basics. The offer is incredibly generous, especially from men who have their own urgent preparations to make for winter. But that's the way of things out here. Today, you, tomorrow, me. Appreciate it," you say simply. The mountain man's way of expressing profound gratitude without indulging in sentimentality. As night deepens and the fire burns low, you make your sleeping arrangements. The dirt floor is still hard, but it's dry now and warm from the fireplace. You spread your blankets near the fire, feeling genuinely comfortable for the first time in days. Cooper and Fitzgerald do the same, positioning themselves so all three of you form a rough semicircle around the hearth. Outside, the wilderness may howl in rage, but in here, in this space created by human hands, from the raw materials of the forest, there is shelter. There is safety. As you drift towards sleep, you look up at the roof, a lattice work of rafters, purlins, and bark visible in the firelight. Water no longer drips on your face. The wind no longer cuts through your blankets. The smoke rises properly up the chimney instead of filling the room. These simple comforts, taken for granted in civilization, feel like miracles here in the wild. Your last thought before sleep takes you is that you've crossed some invisible threshold. You're no longer just surviving in the wilderness. You're beginning to live in it. Unlike your modern home, with its insulated walls and central heating, this cabin is still crude and primitive, but it's shelter of your own making, crafted with your own hands from the forest around you. And that makes all the profound difference. Tomorrow will bring more work, endless work, the brutal reality of mountain life. But tonight, you rest in the knowledge that the worst of the storm can no longer reach you. You're building more than a cabin here. You're building a life. You wake to an unfamiliar silence. The relentless howling wind that has been your constant companion for days has finally ceased. The storm has passed. Light, a soft, diffused presence, filters through the small gaps in the bark roof, casting dappled patterns on the dirt floor. The fire has burned low during the night, but the cabin has retained its warmth remarkably well, a testament to its burgeoning integrity. Cooper and Fitzgerald are still sleeping, their synchronized snores creating a strange, comforting duet in the morning quiet. You rise silently, careful not to disturb them, adding a few sticks to the fire. The flames catch quickly, sending new, welcome warmth through the small space. Outside, through the single small window opening, covered with an oiled piece of rawhide, you can discern a world utterly transformed. Everything is white, pristine, silent. Snow blankets the clearing in drifts that reach halfway up the cabin walls in places, a monumental, beautiful burden. "Storm's done," Fitzgerald says behind you, his voice rough with sleep. He sits up, stretching his lanky frame, a series of satisfying cracks punctuating the silence. "Going to be cold as a witch's tit today, though." Cooper grunts, rolling over. "What's for breakfast?" "I'm hungry enough to eat my moccasins." Despite the crude conditions, there's something deeply satisfying about this moment. The cabin, your cabin, has withstood its first brutal storm. The roof held, the chimney drew properly, the walls kept out the worst of the wind. It's far from finished, but it protected you through the long, perilous night. I found this amazing diary entry from a trapper named Hugh Glass, who wrote, "First morning in my own cabin after the storm broke. Never thought 4 walls and a roof could feel like a palace. Damn near cried into my coffee like some soft town boy. Breakfast is the last of the rabbit from last night, reheated over the fresh fire. The meat is even better after sitting overnight. Its flavors more concentrated, richer. You eat silently, savoring each precious bite, knowing that procuring food will be a constant, pressing concern in the unforgiving months ahead." He's right. A proper floor is more than comfort. It's another crucial layer of protection against the cold and wet that kill more mountain men than bullets or bears ever did. "Got enough straight logs for floor joists?" Fitzgerald asks, his gaze sweeping over your remaining timber. "Should have," you reply. "Cut more than I needed for the walls." "Good," he nods. "We'll get on that after we dig ourselves out a bit. The first order of business is clearing a path from the door." The snow has drifted against it, piling nearly 4 feet high. Cooper uses a flat piece of bark as a makeshift shovel, cutting through the drift to create a narrow, arduous passage. The cold hits you like a physical blow when you step outside. The storm may have passed, but it's left behind temperatures that would freeze spit before it hit the ground. The sky above is a hard, brittle blue, utterly without a cloud in sight. Your breath creates a fog around your face that quickly turns to ice crystals in your beard. Despite the brutal cold, the scene possesses an undeniable, stark beauty. The forest surrounding your clearing is transformed into a crystalline wonderland. Every branch is coated in white, the snow sparkling like scattered diamonds in the morning sun. "Got to admit," Cooper says, pausing in his shoveling to survey the breathtaking, treacherous landscape. "Don't get views like this back in St. Louis. Pretty don't keep you warm. Though," Fitzgerald replies practically, ever focused on the grim realities. "Let's get that floor in. You honestly wouldn't believe how tricky proper floor construction was for these men. When I visited the Mountain Men Museum in Wyoming, the curator showed me a reconstructed cabin floor and explained they didn't have the luxury of milled lumber. Every single board had to be split by hand using an axe and wedges, a grueling process called riving. It was incredibly labor-intensive, and the results were far from perfect. Back inside, you begin by meticulously measuring and marking where the floor joists will go. These are the crucial support beams that will hold up the floor itself, running perpendicular to the long axis of the cabin. They need to be spaced evenly, about 2 feet apart, and somehow securely attached to the bottom logs of the walls. Best way is to notch the sill logs, Fitzgerald explains, pointing to the lowest logs of the cabin walls. Cut depressions for the joists to sit in. Keeps everything level, with Fitzgerald directing. You and Cooper take turns wielding the axe, carefully cutting notches into the sill logs. It's precise, demanding work, requiring intense concentration and an absolutely steady hand. Each notch needs to be the exact same depth, or the floor will end up perilously uneven. Once the notches are cut, you drag in the logs you've selected for joists, straight pines about 6 inches in diameter. These need to be flattened on top to provide a level surface for the floor planks. This is done with the axe again, used almost like a plane to carefully hew away the curved upper surface of each log to create a flat plane. Like this, Cooper demonstrates, making smooth, controlled swings with the axe. The blade bites into the wood at a shallow angle, peeling away thin strips rather than chopping deeply. You're not trying to fell it, just shave it flat. It's a skill that takes immense practice. Your first attempts are ragged and uneven, but you improve with each stroke, driven by sheer necessity. By midday, you've flattened the top surfaces of 5 joists and fitted them into their notches along one half of the cabin. Coming along, Fitzgerald approves, inspecting your work. Now for the hard part. The hard part, it turns out, is creating the actual floorboards. Without a proper sawmill, you have to split them from logs, a grueling process that produces rough, uneven planks at best. Cooper selects a straight-grained pine about 15 inches in diameter. This will do. We'll split it into quarters first, then eighths, then 16. Each split gives us another board. Using axes and wooden wedges, you begin the laborious process of splitting the log. Cooper drives the first wedge into the end grain with the back of his axe, then adds a second when the split starts to widen. Slowly, methodically, you work more wedges down the length of the log until, with a final groan of tearing wood fibers, it splits neatly in half. Got a good grain on this one, Cooper says with satisfaction. Makes the job easier. I read an account from a pioneer woman who watched her husband and brothers build their cabin. She wrote, the men spent an entire day splitting just one log for floorboards. By nightfall, their hands were bleeding, and they had only 8 rough planks to show for their labor. Yet they counted it a good day's work. The brutal process continues. Each half is split again, and then again, until you have rough planks approximately 2 inches thick. These are still wildly uneven, their split sides jagged with splinters and torn fibers. Need to smooth these a bit, Fitzgerald says, running his hand over the rough surface of a plank. Won't be pretty, but should at least be flat enough to walk on without catching splinters big as your finger. This is accomplished with the axe again, used almost like a plane to shave down the high spots and rough edges. It's slow, painstaking work, but gradually the planks begin to take on a more uniform appearance. By late afternoon, you've created enough floorboards to cover about half the cabin floor. These are laid across the joists, their edges butting against each other as closely as possible. They're not nailed down. Nails are far too precious to use on a floor, but their sheer weight keeps them relatively stable. Good, Cooper says, stomping on the new floor to test it. Solid. The difference is immediate and striking. The rough planks may not be pretty, but they lift you off the cold, damp earth. The feeling of a solid floor beneath your feet after weeks of sleeping on dirt is surprisingly emotional. I found a letter in the Montana Historical Society archives where a trapper wrote to his brother, "Finally got my floor laid down." You'd laugh to see it, crooked as a dog's hind leg and full of splinters. But I damn near wept when I could stand on wood instead of dirt for the first time in months. It's the little things out here that keep a man sane. Better put in that sleeping platform before we lose the light, Fitzgerald says, looking at the sun already dipping toward the western mountains. Days are short this time of year, and darkness comes early and swiftly. The sleeping platform is essentially a raised bed built into one corner of the cabin. It serves two crucial purposes: getting you off the floor for sleeping and creating invaluable storage space underneath. You select the north corner, strategically positioned away from both the door and the fireplace. Using the same techniques as the floor, you create a simple frame attached to the walls, supported by two posts on the open side. Across this frame, you lay more split planks, creating a platform about 2 feet off the floor and large enough for one person to sleep comfortably. Might want to stuff that with pine boughs, Cooper suggests. Makes for a softer bed and warmer, Fitzgerald adds. Airspace underneath keeps the cold from seeping up through. With the floor half completed and the sleeping platform in place, the cabin is beginning to feel like a home rather than just a crude shelter. The transformation is remarkable, considering it was nothing but standing trees just days ago. As darkness falls, Cooper heads out again to check his snares. He returns empty-handed this time, but unbothered. Can't expect rabbit every day, he says with a shrug, his pragmatism unwavering. Dinner reverts to jerky and the last of Fitzgerald's parched corn. You eat by firelight, the flames casting long shadows on the newly constructed floor and walls. You did good finding this spot, Fitzgerald says, breaking a long silence. Good water, good timber, south-facing slope, picked like a man who knew what he was looking for. It's the closest thing to a compliment you've received from him, and it warms you nearly as much as the fire. Got lucky, you admit. Spent 3 days looking, almost gave up. Cooper snorts, a rough, knowing sound. Luck's just preparation, meeting opportunity. You knew what to look for. You found it. There's profound truth in his words. You may be new to cabin building, but you've learned enough about survival in your months in the mountains to recognize a good wintering spot when you see one. How long you two been out here? You ask, curiosity finally getting the better of you. Fitzgerald and Cooper exchange a glance, some unspoken communication passing between them. I came up the Missouri in '28, Fitzgerald answers. Signed on with the Rocky Mountain Fur Company. Been trapping these mountains ever since. 6 years, you say, genuinely impressed. Many men don't last one season, he nods. Coop's been out longer. Tell him, co-op. Cooper stares into the fire, his weathered face even more lined in the flickering light. Since 22 was with Ashley's first expedition. Seen the elephant, as they say, 12 years in the mountains. It's almost unimaginable. The average lifespan of a mountain man is shockingly short, perhaps 5 years, if they're lucky. Between hostile tribes, grizzlies, accidents, and the simple, Brutal realities of wilderness life. Few make it more than a decade. I discovered a census of trappers from the American Fur Company in 1830 that showed the average age of death for mountain men was just 35. The researcher I spoke with at the Denver Museum told me these were incredibly tough men, but the mountains were tougher. For someone to survive more than 10 years in that environment wasn't just impressive. It was almost miraculous. You boys got plans for the spring? You ask, anticipating the inevitable parting. Fitzgerald shrugs. Usual. Follow the beaver sign. Try not to get scalped or eaten. Maybe head down to Rendezvous if the pelts are good. Heard they're holding it at Green River again, Cooper adds. The annual rendezvous is the closest thing to civilization most trappers see from one year to the next. A raucous gathering where furs are traded, supplies purchased, and a year's worth of isolation is balanced with a few weeks of gambling, drinking, and storytelling. You should come along, Fitzgerald says, his gaze steady. If you make it through winter, that is. It's both an invitation and a stark, sobering reminder of the immense challenges still ahead. Winter in these mountains is a merciless test, and your cabin, for all its recent improvements, is still just a rough shelter against forces that have killed better prepared men. Planning on it, you reply simply, your voice firm. The evening deepens into night. Outside, the temperature plummets further, but inside, the fireplace radiates steady, comforting heat. The new floor and sleeping platform have already made a noticeable, profound difference in comfort. Tomorrow we'll finish that floor, Cooper says, spreading his blanket. Maybe put in some shelves if there's time. You're going to need places to store things. I've got some ideas about that, you say, thinking of the wall space above the sleeping platform. And I want to build a small table, maybe a stool. Fitzgerald nods approvingly. Thinking like a man who plans to stay alive. Good. You know what truly captivated me about these men? In a letter I found at the Historical Society in Bozeman, a trapper wrote, "Built my first chair yesterday. Crude thing. Looks like it was made by a blind man with palsy. But sitting on it tonight, eating my supper like a civilized human instead of squatting like an animal. I felt like a king. These small, hard-won comforts meant absolutely everything when they had gone without for so long. Got, as you settle in for the night, you can't help but reflect on how much has profoundly changed in just a few days. From exposed and vulnerable to sheltered and relatively secure. From struggling alone to working alongside experienced, capable companions. The cabin is still primitive by any civilized standard, but out here, it is a fortress against the wilderness. Sleep comes easily tonight, your body utterly exhausted from the day's monumental labor, but your mind is finally at ease. The comforting sound of the fire and the steady breathing of your companions create a cocoon of security in the darkness. You dream of the cabin completed, floor fully laid, walls meticulously chinked with moss and clay, shelves filled with vital supplies, maybe even a small window cut into the south wall to let in more precious light. In the dream, snow piles high outside, but you are warm and secure within. Unlike your comfortable modern bed, with its plush mattress and layers of blankets, your sleeping platform is still hard and unyielding, but it's dry. It's off the ground, and it's yours, built with your own hands from the forest around you. And that makes all the profound difference. As consciousness fades, one thought circles in your mind. Asterisk, I am becoming part of this place. And it is becoming part of me. Asterisk. The cabin isn't just shelter. It's the beginning of a new life, rooted in the wilderness that once seemed so utterly hostile. Tomorrow will bring more work, more challenges. But tonight you rest in the growing knowledge that you might actually survive. And in these mountains, survival is no small victory. The night deepens. The fire burns low, its embers casting a fading glow, and the cabin holds the three of you in its rough, protective embrace. A tiny island of humanity in a vast, indifferent sea of wilderness. Outside, the stars wheel overhead, brilliantly clear and cold in the frigid air. Wolves call from a distant ridge, their haunting howls echoing across the snow-covered valley, a primal symphony. But inside there are walls of your own making, a roof overhead, a floor beneath, and the profound, enduring promise of tomorrow. Morning arrives with a painful, blinding brightness, sunlight reflecting off the fresh snow and filtering through the strategic cracks in the cabin walls. 3 demanding days have passed since the storm broke. 3 days of relentless, unceasing work, finishing the floor, building crude but essential furniture, meticulously sealing gaps, preparing for the long, brutal winter ahead. And now, the inevitable moment has arrived. It is time for Cooper and Fitzgerald to leave. "Can't put it off any longer," Cooper says, kneeling by the fire to heat a cup of water. "Our own cabin needs tending before the next storm hits." You nod, understanding the immutable law of the mountains, but a strange sense of loss lingers. These men were strangers just days ago. Yet, sharing the grueling labor of building, of survival, has forged a connection that feels surprisingly deep, undeniably vital. "Appreciate the help," you say simply, the mountain man's unspoken language of gratitude. Stripped of sentimentality, Fitzgerald waves it off, a dismissive flick of his hand. You'd have done the same. The profound truth is, you would have. That is the unwritten, immutable code out here. Today, you. Tomorrow, me. No man truly survives these mountains entirely alone. I discovered a letter from a mountain man named Jim Bridger, where he wrote, "Helped raise Thornton's cabin walls last week. He'll likely be my competition for beaver come spring. But that's a problem for later. Winter demands we stand together, even if briefly. Come spring, we'll go back to guarding our trap lines like misers." The cabin has transformed remarkably in just a few days. The floor is complete now, rough split planks covering the entire dirt surface, elevating you from the cold earth. A small functional table stands against the west wall, cobbled together from smaller logs and topped with a flattened section of pine. Beside it sits a 3-legged stool, crude but undeniably useful, a vast improvement over squatting on the floor. Shelves now line the wall above your sleeping platform, providing crucial places to store food and supplies, safe from mice and other opportunistic vermin. The fireplace has been refined, its chimney draw improved by meticulously adjusting some of the upper stones. Perhaps most importantly, every single crack between the logs has been carefully chinked with a mixture of mud, moss, and pine needles. The sealed walls now keep out the biting wind far more effectively than before, a palpable comfort. "Turned out all right," Cooper says, looking around with quiet approval, a rare note of satisfaction in his gruff voice. "Better than my first cabin, that's for damn sure." "Oh?" You raise an eyebrow, genuinely curious about his history. He chuckles, a rare, rough sound. "Roof collapsed first. Heavy snow nearly buried me alive. Had to dig my way out and start over with 2 feet of snow already on the ground. How do you manage?" You ask, the enormity of his past ordeal dawning on you. Cooper shrugs, his eyes distant, filled with unspoken memories. "Same way anyone manages out here. One day at a time, one log at a time." There's profound wisdom in his simple philosophy. The wilderness cannot be conquered all at once. Survival happens incrementally. One meal, one shelter, one day stacked upon the next. A relentless accumulation of victories. After a breakfast of jerky and the last of the parched corn, Cooper and Fitzgerald gather their few essential possessions. They travel light, as all mountain men must. Rifle, possibles bag, knife, axe, blanket, the raw tools of survival, nothing more. "Where's your cabin?" you ask, realizing you never thought to inquire before. "Down by the fork," Fitzgerald replies, gesturing vaguely southward. "About half a day's walk when there's no snow. Probably take us till nightfall in this. The snow remains deep, nearly 3 feet in places. Travel will be utterly exhausting, especially breaking trail through untouched drifts. You should take snowshoes," you say, pointing to a pair hanging on the wall. Crude things you'd fashioned earlier in the fall from bent wood and rawhide strips. Cooper shakes his head. "Keep them. We got our own back at camp. At least take some of the rabbit meat," you insist. There's still a good portion left, smoked over the fire to preserve it. This they accept with nods of thanks. Meat is currency in the mountains, more valuable than gold. I once read a journal entry from a trapper in 1834 who wrote, offered Taylor 5 beaver pelts for half his elk haunch. He refused, saying, "Can't eat pelts." He was right, of course. A man gets hungry enough, he'd trade a year's worth of furs for a decent meal. At the door, Fitzgerald pauses. "Might check in on you if we're passing through. Make sure you ain't froze solid." It's as close to expressing genuine concern as a mountain man gets. You nod, understanding the profound sentiment behind the gruff words. "Door's always open," you reply. "Except when it's closed against the cold." Cooper actually laughs at that, a short barking sound. "Reckon we've turned him into a proper mountain man." Fitz, already making terrible jokes, with final nods and brief handshakes, rare physical contact in a world where men typically keep their distance. They depart. You watch from the doorway as they trudge through the deep snow, following the crude path you've all worn between the cabin and the creek. They don't look back. That's not the way out here. And just like that, you're alone again. The cabin feels larger somehow without their presence, and profoundly quieter. You close the door against the relentless cold and lean your back against it, surveying your hard-won domain. It's still crude by any civilized standard, rough logs, dirt showing through gaps in the floor planks, smoke stains already darkening the ceiling around the chimney. But it's solid. It will keep you alive through the winter if you're smart and a little lucky. Now comes the next crucial phase, preparing for the long, crushing isolation ahead. Here's a sobering fact. I found records from fur company registers showing that approximately 1 in 5 mountain men died during their first winter alone. The most common causes weren't dramatic attacks by bears or hostile tribes. It was starvation, illness, or simple accidents, with no one around to help. With Cooper and Fitzgerald gone, your first priority is unequivocally food. The remaining rabbit meat will last only a day or two. After that, you'll need to hunt or trap regularly to survive, a relentless daily imperative. You spend the morning setting snares along game trails near the creek, small loops of twisted rawhide attached to bent saplings. When triggered, they snap upright, catching rabbits or other small game by the leg or neck. It's a passive, efficient way of hunting that works while you attend to other vital tasks. Next, you need to build up your firewood supply. A cabin this size will consume enormous, insatiable amounts of wood to stay warm through the winter. Running out of fuel in February would be an absolute death sentence. You drag fallen logs from the nearby forest, cutting them into lengths with your axe. The work is utterly exhausting in the deep snow, but entirely necessary. By midday, you've assembled a substantial woodpile against the south wall of the cabin, strategically protected from the worst of the wind and conveniently close to the door. Inside, you continue organizing. The shelves need filling. Supplies need meticulous arranging. Everything must have its designated place in the confined, precious space of the cabin. From your possibles bag, you take inventory of what little you have. Flint and steel for fire starting, a small pouch of precious salt, needle and sinew for repairs, extra lead balls and powder for your rifle, a whetstone for keeping your knife and axe sharp. These vital items get carefully arranged on the highest shelf, safe from moisture and destructive rodents. You hang your rifle on pegs above the door, easily accessible, but out of the way. Your axe leans in the corner near the fireplace, its blade protected by a leather sheath you fashioned from scraps. I've always been fascinated by how these men organize their tiny, critical spaces. One archaeological excavation of a trapper's cabin found that he'd created specialized storage areas. One corner for food, another for tools, a third for furs and hides. Everything had its place, maximizing the efficiency of a space barely larger than a modern bathroom. By late afternoon, you've established order, a sense of control within your small domain. The cabin feels not just livable now, but almost comfortable, a monumental shift. Still, there's something missing, something you can't quite name, until you spot the blank expanse of log wall beside your sleeping platform. A home needs some kind of personal touch, even out here, in the heart of the wild. From your possibles bag, you take the stub of a pencil, a luxury item you've held onto through your months in the mountains, a remnant of another life. With careful, deliberate strokes, you begin to mark the wall. Not elaborate drawings, just simple hash marks to count the agonizing days. Today is October 28, 1834. Winter stretches ahead, long and uncertain, a vast white void. Below the calendar marks, you sketch a rough map of the surrounding area from memory: the creek, the ridge to the north, the valley opening to the south. Landmarks that might prove useful if you need to navigate in heavy snow or blinding blizzards. This small, profound act of personalization transforms the space in a subtle but incredibly important way. The cabin is no longer just shelter. It's becoming your home. As darkness falls early, as it always does this time of year, you build up the fire and prepare a simple dinner from the remaining rabbit meat. Eating alone again feels strange, almost jarring, after the brief, precious companionship of the past few days. I found this heartbreaking passage in a trapper's journal. First night alone in my new cabin. The silence is complete, except for the fire's crackle. I caught myself talking to the walls earlier just to hear a human voice. Recited my mother's favorite psalm. Though I ain't been a praying man for years, the sound faded too quickly. You sit on your newly made stool, elbows on the rough table, and consider the daunting months ahead. Winter in these mountains typically lasts until April, at least. 5 months of crushing isolation, relentless cold, and constant, debilitating vigilance. Many men don't make it. Those who do are forever changed, fundamentally reshaped by the brutal experience. The prospect should be terrifying, yet you feel a strange, profound calm. The arduous, monumental work of building the cabin has imbued you with a newfound confidence. If you can transform standing trees into shelter in a matter of days, what else might you accomplish? Sleep comes early, your body still utterly exhausted from days of relentless labor. The sleeping platform, padded now with pine boughs beneath your blanket, is almost comfortable, a miraculous luxury. The fireplace radiates steady, life-giving heat that reaches even the furthest corners of the small space. You wake once in the night to add more wood to the fire. Standing in the silent darkness, you listen to the cabin settling around you, the soft creaks and pops of new wood adjusting to temperature changes, the occasional sliding thump of snow falling from the roof. These sounds that might have seemed ominous before now feel almost companionable. The cabin is alive in its way, shifting and breathing with the cold, a constant, reassuring presence. Morning brings new purpose, a renewed sense of resolute determination. You check your snares and find 2 rabbits, smaller than you'd like, but food nonetheless, a vital prize. You clean them carefully outside, saving even the entrails to use as bait for other traps, a testament to unwavering resourcefulness. The temperature has dropped further overnight. Your breath freezes instantly in the still air, and the snow squeaks beneath your boots, a sure, chilling sign of deep cold. Inside the cabin, frost is formed in the corners furthest from the fireplace, despite your tireless efforts at sealing every crack. This will be the true test of your construction. Not just keeping out wind and snow, but fighting against the bone-deep cold that can kill a sleeping man before he ever wakes to add wood to his fire. You spend the day making final crucial improvements to the cabin. Using mud mixed with ashes from the fireplace, you seal the remaining gaps between logs, eradicating any insidious drafts. You add a second layer of bark to portions of the roof that still allowed in too much cold air. You fashion a crude door for the window opening that can be closed at night to preserve precious heat. By midday, you've done all you can reasonably do to winterize the cabin, to fortify it against the coming onslaught. Now comes another crucial task: creating a cache of emergency supplies outside the cabin. I spoke with a wilderness survival expert who explained the profound logic behind this practice. Mountain men would build small concealed caches some distance from their cabins. If disaster struck, fire, roof collapse, marauding hostiles, they'd have emergency supplies to fall back on. It could mean the difference between death and survival. You select a location about 50 yards from the cabin, near a distinctive lightning-struck pine that would be visible even in heavy snow, a crucial landmark. There, you dig through the snow to the frozen ground beneath, then use your axe to chip out a small hollow. In this cache, you meticulously place emergency fire-starting materials wrapped in oiled buckskin, a small, keen knife, a handful of lead balls and enough powder for a few shots, and some precious jerky. Just enough to keep a man alive for a day or two, a desperate, last-ditch lifeline. You cover the cache with rocks, then snow, carefully marking its location with a subtle arrangement of sticks that would look entirely natural to anyone. But you, insurance against an uncertain future. Returning to the cabin, you're struck by how solid and resolute it looks now. Smoke rises steadily from the chimney, a beacon of life, its walls standing square and defiant against the snow. Hard to believe it was just standing timber less than a week ago. Inside, you add wood to the fire and settle in for the evening. The early darkness of winter means long, solitary nights ahead, hours to fill before sleep finally comes. In time, you'll need to develop routines, rituals even, to maintain your sanity through the crushing isolation. Some men whittle or carve. Others keep meticulous journals. Still others simply sit and think, turning memories over like precious smooth stones. For now, though, you're content to simply be to feel the profound warmth of the fire, to listen to the soft hiss and pop of burning pine, to know with absolute certainty that you've created this sanctuary through your own raw effort and unwavering will. I found a letter from a mountain man to his brother back east that captures this feeling perfectly. Strange to say, Thomas, but I feel a deeper satisfaction in this crude cabin I built with my own hands than in any fine house I ever entered. Every log, every stone in the fireplace, every plank in the floor represents my own labor, my own choices. There is profound peace in that knowledge, even amidst the hardships. Night deepens outside. You check the door latch, add more wood to the fire, and settle onto your sleeping platform. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, more hunting, more preparations for the deepening, relentless winter. But tonight, you rest in the profound knowledge that you've accomplished something truly significant. You've transformed raw wilderness into shelter. You've created a space that stands squarely between you and death. You've proven to yourself, at least, that you belong in these mountains. The firelight flickers on the log walls, casting warm, dancing shadows. Outside, the temperature continues to drop, stars brittle and bright in the black sky. Inside, you are warm, sheltered, alive. Unlike your comfortable bed in the modern world, where survival is taken for granted, here every moment of comfort is earned through immense effort and hard-won knowledge. Every night survived is a victory. Every morning awakened is a gift. As sleep begins to claim you, your thoughts drift to Cooper and Fitzgerald. They should have reached their own cabin by now, perhaps sitting by their own fire, planning their own winter. Come spring, your paths might cross again, at rendezvous, or perhaps while working the same stream for beaver. The mountain man's life is often solitary, but never completely alone. Somewhere out there, others like you are fighting the same brutal battle against cold and hunger and isolation. This knowledge provides its own kind of solace, a profound comfort. Your breathing slows, deepens. The cabin holds you in its rough embrace, solid and secure. The fire murmurs in the hearth, a language as old as humanity itself. Your last thought before sleep takes you completely is simple, but profound. I built this with these hands. I built this, and as you drift into dreams, perhaps your thoughts mingle with those of the person listening to this story. Warm and comfortable in their own bed, separated from the harsh realities of mountain life by centuries of progress. Perhaps they too feel a whisper of connection to those brave, desperate men who carved shelters from the wilderness with nothing but determination and simple tools. Perhaps they too can appreciate the profound satisfaction of creating something that sustains life. Something that stands between fragile humanity and the indifferent, colossal forces of nature. And perhaps, as sleep gently overtakes them, they'll carry with them a deeper understanding of what it truly meant to build a home in the wild, one grueling log at a time. The fire burns low. The cabin stands strong against the night. Winter settles in around it, harsh but beautiful. And inside, a mountain man sleeps, ready to face whatever tomorrow brings. Rest well, knowing that the human spirit has always found ways to create warmth and shelter, even in the most challenging, unforgiving circumstances.